Well, good evening to all. Iowa, just 2 days away from a de facto play-in game for the Big Ten championship game. I shouldn't say a de facto play-in game because if Iowa loses it, Nebraska still doesn't go to a bowl game, and Iowa just doesn't go to the championship game. So it's win or well, actually, technically, there is a route. I'm kind of stumbling here out of the gates. So there is a route for Iowa to get into the championship game if they lose. But for the sake of this discussion, Iowa needs to win on Friday. If they win, they are in. We're here to talk about it for the next hour or two with myself and the one and only Coach Don Patterson. Don, welcome.
Corey, how are you tonight?
I'm hanging in there, Don. We got.
At least you didn't start laughing when you saw my smiling face.
I want to tell you, Don, I had a lot of people the other day ask me if they pony up and buy you a cowboy hat if you'll wear it on the show.
I'm not much for hats. Now, I guess I can tell you why. Think about this. I was at the United States Military Academy for 4 years. You have to wear a cap at all times if you're out in public. And in the Army, of course, same thing applies. If you're out in public and you're in uniform, then you wear a cap. So I kind of got tired of people expecting me to always wear a cap, and I very seldom did. In rare cases, I'd wear it in coaching, but in general, I didn't. And I guess that's why I've got an aversion to caps.
Okay, so you're not going to commit to anything, but if I get a cowboy hat in the mail, Don, from one of our listeners, it's being forwarded on to you. All right, want to remind everybody before we get going and start talking about the matchup this Friday, and Don, I know you've done some major homework on the Huskers and on this matchup and some of the analytics at least you can share with us on keys to being victorious. And of course, again, as we mentioned at the outset, if Iowa wins, they are in the conference championship game and they'll head to Indy for the second straight season. But before we get to the nitty gritty, a reminder, if you're new to the channel or if you've been watching for a while and enjoy the content, please subscribe to our channel. This is from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We've got post-game content, game previews, weekly picks. We've got podcasts with interviews with future recruits, former players, former coaches. We've got the whole shebang here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, and it's free to subscribe. So please do that, and please scroll down and hit the like button. We've got around 50 people here to start the show. Please, if you'd hit that like button, that would certainly help. And one final reminder, please take the time to do this now if you can. Please share the show out on social media. Social media on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, wherever. Reddit, I don't care. Please share the stream out. If you're enjoying it, other Hawkeye fans will as well. All right, Don. So we know the storylines here. Iowa has climbed back to a more than respectable record at 7-4. They have found a way through a difficult schedule, which featured the two best teams in this conference. And I think undeniably the two best teams in this conference. First of all, before we get to this matchup, how has Iowa done this? Now that you've had a few days to digest the Minnesota win in conjunction with the win against Northwestern, Purdue, Wisconsin, how has Iowa done this after kind of being left for dead at 3-4?
Well, I think going all the way back to Northwestern, it was probably the ideal opponent at the time because we'd lost some players had lost confidence with how they could play against Michigan, Ohio State, those two in particular. And Northwestern, safe to say, was a lesser challenge. So we had a chance not only to beat them, but to feel good about the way we played and gain some confidence with how we could play. And that got us a little bit back on track. And then, of course, we did, no doubt about it, we played an outstanding game against Purdue to be able to control them the way we did. And then Wisconsin presented another hurdle, but at least we were playing them in Ankeny. I think that helped. And then of course, off to Minnesota. Addressing Minnesota in particular, let me say this, Corey. As you know, last year after the season, I worked really long and hard to come up with a prediction model that I thought was the most reliable thing I could find in predicting who won a football game. And the idea for a prediction model, of course, is don't base it on all kinds of parameters. Keep that number as small as you can to still have a definitive prediction model. Well, I found one that I thought was outstanding. It only involved 4 parameters. Last year, in an entire season of 64 games, the record in the end was 56 wins and 3 losses. That was a good prediction model. That's 95% win. That only left 5 games as ties. Obviously, if there are 4 parameters involved, it's conceivable that they can tie with 2 apiece, or for that matter, in theory, with 1 apiece. Maybe they're even on a couple of parameters and they each win 1. But there were only 5 ties, so that was a good prediction model because it had a high percentage of accuracy and it was almost all inclusive. I took that prediction model off season and I applied it to this season. Right now, Corey, in 56 games, that same prediction model, the record is now 49 wins and 3 losses. That is 94% win, which is 1% less than last year. It's safe to say that prediction model is still holding up really well. And to be specific, even though Minnesota won 8 of the top 15 parameters, that only left us winning 7, we won 3 out of 4 among that prediction model. Isn't any wonder that we won the game in spite of getting just run off the field, of course, in terms of rushing yardage. It's rare when you win a football game and you lose the rushing battle by a couple of 100 yards and then some. But we did, in part because we won the parameters that mattered the most. And thankfully we did, because that gave us an unlikely win. When you look at the stats, some people would find it hard to believe that we won the game. Well, in fact, we won the parameters that mattered the most. And that carried more weight than more parameters that didn't matter quite so much. Hope that makes sense.
And again, for the record, you're not going to share those 4 parameters with us, correct?
No. That's privileged information. The only people that have a right to know that are the ones that wear the black and gold on Saturdays, or in the case of this week, on Fridays.
All right, let's talk about the notion that Nebraska does or does not have an explosive offense, because that's been a kind of a topic as we've been previewing this game throughout the week. I, of course, had a conversation with Mark Rogers about it. Did a preview on my channel, Don. I think you heard that. What do you make of the Nebraska offense with Casey Thompson? I know he's been dealing with injuries. Trey Palmer has been a feature guy in that offense. Certainly, they've got a good back, not to the level of a Mo Ibrahim or even a Braylon Allen, but just your overall thoughts on the Nebraska offense.
I see him as a dangerous football team. And that's assuming that those principal players are all available to play tomorrow, play on Friday. But they remind me a little bit of a team like Maryland, who also relies a lot on big plays. Another one that comes to mind, of course, is Purdue. So when you play a team like that, you need to have it as a priority to do your best to eliminate those big plays. Of course, if that's their strength, making big plays, then our strength is preventing big plays on defense. We don't give them up very often at all. Our defense takes great pride in eliminating explosive plays, and they do a good job of that. I'll just give you an idea about Nebraska. Explosive plays, they played 8 conference games, they're 2-6. In those 8 conference games, they've only won explosive plays in 3 of those 8 games. There was a tie. That happened to be against Indiana way in the early season. But Michigan, Wisconsin, and Northwestern all had more explosive plays. Let's go to super explosives. Super explosives, Nebraska does better. And as you know, super explosive is any play 30 yards or more. Nebraska in their 8 games, won the super explosive play category. 5 of those 8 games, there were 2 ties. Only one team had more super explosives than they did, and that was Rutgers. And they overcame it against Rutgers because, as you know, they beat Rutgers by 1 point way in the early season. So they did outdo their opponent in 5 out of those 8 games. There were 2 ties. I'm talking about on home runs, plays 30 yards or more. So yes, it's a concern that they might make some home runs. I'll say it this way, Corey. I don't think I think they know who they are. They played 8 conference games now. They know who they are. What are the odds they're going to sustain drives against us a lot like Minnesota? Not going to happen. We're not going to let it happen to begin with. We didn't want it to happen against Minnesota either, but they did sustain drives against us. Let's face it. So did Michigan. Ohio State was hit and miss. Ohio State's another team that relies a lot on explosives and super explosives. So it would make sense to me, and I know it makes sense to Phil Parker. This got to be a priority for us. We have to do a great job of defending the big play because make no doubt about it, they're going to try to make big plays. It's not just going to happen. They're going to try to make it happen. And there are going to be shots down the field. And it does concern me a little bit that it's ideal conditions, especially when you factor in that we're in November. So we have to be on top of our game. We have to be prepared to defend all those attempts that are meant to gain big yards.
And when you say ideal conditions, we're talking 50 degrees, no wind, and any wind that we may have would probably die down by the second half anyways as you get into the early nighttime hours. So, yeah, I mean, that's advantage Nebraska all the way around. And you talk about the ability to create explosive plays. Don, who's the one guy for Iowa who's been a threat to create or to be a part of explosive plays? Besides Caleb Johnson, who's knocked off a couple this year, who's the one guy that's done that?
Oh, gee, I might consider number 84 to be that guy.
And you and I both know he's not playing. So
right,
probably not the day you want explosive plays to be a factor. But you're right. Weather is certainly a factor. All right, folks, we've got our call line open. We're going to talk more with Coach Patterson about Nebraska and about the game ahead, which, of course, is on Friday at 3 p.m. on BTN. Of course, we'll have Iowa postgame with Coach Patterson, but much, much more. If you want to call the show, the number is 515-635-1601, 515-635-1601. You can also join by means of the link in the description below. Before we take our first call from Cole, let's get a word from our sponsor. Welcome to Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click-together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. All right, so appreciate Iowa Floor Covering this evening, and we'll hear from them again later in our show. I want to add Cole to the mix now. Cole is a Nebraska fan. I think this is our Nebraska fan, Cole. Cole, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Right in the depths of this coaching search that's driving me absolutely nuts. And I think most of Nebraska's focus is on what happens after this game, not this game. But it's an interesting matchup. I think what people misunderstood is the beginning of the season, our defense was absolutely horrible. I mean, they gave up, I think, about 700 yards to Georgia Southern in Memorial Stadium. And then they went and played. Well, then Frost got fired. Mickey Joseph took over. Oklahoma came to town. They just stomped us again, and then Mickey Joseph said, "That's enough of you," and got rid of the defensive coordinator, and Bill Bush took over. Ever since that happened, our defense has dramatically improved, in my opinion. They're not the most talented team on the interior, but they have done a very nice job stopping the run. I was at the Minnesota game. They held Mo Ibrahim to negative rushing yards in the first half. And Minnesota could not run the ball in the first half. Obviously, they made adjustments at halftime, and he had over 100 yards in the second half when Nebraska crumbled. But up until that point, Our run def, like I think Corum had about they're good at limiting the big plays on rushing big plays. But yeah, I was very down on the defense the first couple games, but they've made some steady improvement this year. What do you guys think about that?
Don, your thoughts? Have you seen that as well since the change at DC for Nebraska?
Cole, tell me this. When was the change made? Was the first game for the interim coach the Purdue game?
No, it was he took over after the Oklahoma game. So
okay, is that before the Rutgers game? I think it is, wasn't it?
That's correct. I think
Rutgers was his first game. I do remember this vividly. His first game, you guys won, as I recall.
Yeah.
The thing that impressed me, they had a scene in the locker room, and it looked to me like Nebraska had just won the Western Division and was going to go to Indianapolis. I'm being very sincere in saying this. It was wonderful for an old coach to see. The guys were thrilled to win a football game, and it was just neat to see them be able to celebrate that moment. And, of course, I have an idea of how hard they work in preparation for the season and whatnot. Just to dispute you a little bit, Cole, and I'm counting the Rutgers game, those are the last 6 games. Nebraska has outrushed only one team in those 6 games. They actually outrushed Minnesota.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how that game played out, and maybe the margins were close. I don't know. But I do know that 5 of the 6 opponents since Mickey's taken over with the new defensive coordinator, they've been outrushed 5 out of 6 games.
What I would say to that is I'd put that way more on the offense.
Gotcha.
Going back to the offense, our biggest issue is we have the worst offensive line in college football.
So your point is we got outrushed, but at least our defense did their part.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Our defense has done their part, but our offensive line cannot do anything consistently. Anthony Grant is a good running back, but it is I think it was the Northwestern game. He had I think 130 yards, 129 of them were after contact. So our offensive line has not helped this team out at all in any sort of imagination. So I'd put that. Our defense has done a good job stopping the run. And Mark Whipple doesn't like to run the ball. So,
and is it fair to say that Anthony Grant is probably underutilized?
He's definitely underutilized. But people have been coming for Mark Whipple's throat because he doesn't run the ball. But our offensive line can't do it consistently. It's really hard for them to get a push.
Besides Purdue just being a sieve, Don, and I'll ask you this question. I know you didn't watch all that game. I know you did, Cole, but Nebraska-Purdue, that was a game where, Nebraska looked like they had one of the best passing offenses in the country on that day. Purdue's secondary is not good, and that's further evidence that Iowa and the success they had in West Lafayette was sort of smoke and mirrors. But what was it in that game, Cole, that you saw besides just Trey Palmer beating his guy and Casey Thompson putting the ball on the money that created so many explosive plays?
It's Trey Palmer. He is a super fast receiver. I think for Nebraska to have a chance against Iowa, he's got to have 1 or 2 big plays. At the Purdue game specifically, like you were talking about, I think there was at least 3 drives where we scored in 20 seconds because Palmer just completely blew by his guy. The Purdue DBs had absolutely no answers for him. That was the most dominant performance by a receiver I've seen at Nebraska.
Well, Cole, I appreciate you jumping on here to give us some perspective from the other side of this. And as you know, if you caught my preview, I think, Don, you haven't given a score prediction, but I think this is going to be a close game, and big plays are what's going. If Nebraska's going to win this game, they're going to win it with some big plays. I just don't see them winning a rock fight. I just don't.
I'm leaning Iowa. I'm just going to be completely honest, just because I don't think Casey Thompson's going to have the time in the pocket to make those big plays downfield. I've watched quite a few Iowa games, and their pass rush is very, very good. And I just don't think our offensive line is going to be able to handle them. I mean, if they do and they get him out of the pocket, then I could see maybe a couple big plays. But if they don't, he's just a sitting duck back there most of the time.
I have a question for you, Cole. If you could assign a numerical value to Thompson, what kind of health status would you think he has for Friday?
I would say he's about 90% healthy. I was nervous about him in the Wisconsin game. I was at the game. It was freezing cold. And
that's true. Not to interrupt you, but that's Cole. That's an interesting point, Don. I didn't think about that. If he's struggling with a shoulder issue, probably some warmer weather would do him well. Cole.
So what actually happened there is in the Illinois game, he scrambled out of the pocket, or they moved the pocket to the left. He stepped up in it, and somebody just happened to hit his elbow like perfectly, and it just made his whole hand go numb. Like, it was crazy. Like, I saw him on the sideline. He was just holding his hand up like this, and it just went completely numb. They said he's still having some nerve damage problems in his pinky, so gripping the ball can be kind of hard. But against Wisconsin, he looked normal to me. I mean, he scrambled a lot. He wasn't sliding. He took a lot of big hits. He looked like Casey before he got hurt to me. Like every series when he came off, they had like an oven mitt that they were putting on his throwing arm to, like, I don't know if it was just to keep his nerves firing or what. But yeah, I think he's about 95% healthy.
And Cole, if I'm not mistaken, he was 12 for 20 against UW, I think, right? He didn't throw a lot, but he was 12 for 20, I believe, in passing. Yeah. So it's not as if he had a terrible day. It was a horrible day to throw a football, and he still did okay.
And it was really windy. It was really windy inside the stadium as well.
He played clean, no picks. So
no, that's another thing. Before he got injured, he was good for about 1 or 2 interceptions a game. And if he can't throw a pick against Iowa, or else I could see we won't have a chance.
Well, Cole, we appreciate your insights, sir. And
you guys have any who? Right now, I'm just going to give an update on the search. Sounds like it's going to be Matt Rule, like 95%, probably Matt Rule. So if you guys care about
let me say this. You don't sound like you're too fired up about Matt Rule. I know Matt Rule. He is an absolutely outstanding coach. I don't care what happened in the NFL. Maybe he's just better suited for college.
Thanks, Don. That gives me more hope.
Honestly, he's an outstanding man, outstanding coach. He'll do a great job for you if he's the guy.
So Laporta is for sure out, right?
Laporta's out. Monty Pottebaum at fullback is out. And Terry Roberts, it sounds like he's out.
That gives me a little bit more hope, just because. So Laporta has, I'm looking at the stats, he has 53 receptions. The next closest is
the leading receiver,
25. Palmer's has 62 receptions. So if you guys can lock down him, you'll be fine. So. And I'm sure Phil Parker has a plan for that.
Is Palmer as healthy as he can be also?
Yeah, he's 100%.
Well, let's remember this, though, Don. Phil does not typically go out of his way to take one receiver out of a game. That's not what he does.
That's true. Charlie Jones is a prime example.
Well, Charlie Jones and every other Purdue receiver that's ever played against Iowa. He does not schematically try to take a guy out of the game. That's just not
my point is. In years past, a particular receiver's hurt us from Purdue. This year, now they targeted Charlie a lot, of course, and that's one reason he had a lot of catches. But the bottom line is, we had a little bit of a gimmick defense in defending Charlie, which I think did bother Purdue some. But they're still going to try to get him the ball, of course, whoever they're playing. And it would make sense, I'm sure, Cole, in your mind, that Nebraska do the same thing with your receiver.
Yeah,
make a real effort to get in the ball.
Whipple does a really good job finding out unique ways to get his best player the ball. That's kind of what he's known for in the college football world. So if they can get him going, he'll be good. And a big difference between this year's game and last year's game that I was thinking about is we all know Nebraska's special teams last year was absolutely horrible. This year we have a really good punter. We haven't lost any games because of the special teams this year. So I think that
big improvement because there were plenty of games lost because of special teams over the last few years, correct?
Yeah, don't remind me. But yeah, the special teams seems to be fixed to me. I mean, I haven't had any complaints about them. Our punters really good. So
Any issues with opponents clapping?
well, we don't do a clapping cadence, so that's good. It's
Okay.
ready, set 90% of the time. So I'm sure Phil Park already knows that. So
Real quick, just one last thing, and then we're gonna let you slide, Cole. How do Nebraska fans like yourself feel about when they see Adrian Martinez having a great year at Kansas State? How does that make them feel?
it's kind of funny because when Adrian needed to go, I don't blame him for transferring, but he was there for a long time. It was getting worse. It wasn't getting better. He needed a fresh start. But the funny thing is, when he transferred to K-State, they said, we're going to turn him into an NFL quarterback. We're not going to run him that much. And then you turn on a Kansas State this game this year, and he throws the ball less than 10 times a game. And all he does, he's just been running around. But I feel like both parties worked out well. I really like Casey Thompson. Sounds like he might be back next year, depending on who this coach is and if Mickey stays. But I'm happy for Adrian. It would have been very interesting if he actually went to Iowa. I don't know how that would have worked out, but
you heard the reports out there. There were reports out there that Iowa did briefly look at him.
Speaking of, I do remember Adrian saying he had another Big Ten team reach out to try and get him. He didn't say exactly who it was, obviously, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was Iowa, because I don't know who else it would be besides like Illinois or somebody like that.
The reports from, I believe it was your rivals guy, whoever that is, for the Nebraska side of things. Apparently, he was the guy that dropped that information. So, take it for what it is.
Adrian does too much backyard football. I don't think it would have been a good fit.
Yeah, what's the upside, right?
Yeah, see you later.
Appreciate it, Cole. I enjoyed that, Don. Get a perspective from a Nebraska fan, one of our loyal listeners here from the Hawkeye the Storm.
Yeah, it's good to talk to someone that knows a lot about Nebraska.
Jim Wood wants Brian Ferentz as the next head coach at Nebraska. Folks, our phone line is open, 515-635-1601. The link to join the show is also in the description below. And once more, I'm going to throw it up in the live chat for anybody that wants to hop on with video or without video. You are welcome to ask Coach Patterson a question or share your thoughts on the big matchup on Friday. A couple things to get to here. Pugmaster, appreciate the super sticker from Pugmaster. Thank you for supporting the show as always. Kellen says, Corey, are you going to the Iowa game? I am not, Kellen. Would love to be there. Had opportunities to be there, but Don, we've talked about this. I love going to Iowa football games, but it makes things difficult when you're trying to do this show. And we got Iowa basketball right after Iowa football on Friday. It's a busy, busy day. So for anybody that's not aware, we will have post-game coverage after basketball and post-game coverage after football. So basically, Don, we've got football at 3, basketball at 6, post-game with Gary Close at 8, post-game with Don Patterson at 9:15, and sleep around 1 a.m. So that's basically what we have, Don. So just so you're aware, I know you are. So, all right.
Yeah, luckily I don't need a lot of sleep.
Clint says, wondering if Don ever made fairly big changes after a successful season. And I don't want to speak for Clint, but my guess here is that Clint's line of thinking is similar to what my line of thinking is, that we need a change at OC. And I've said that on numerous occasions, Don. I'm not asking you to disagree or agree with that idea or endorse it or not endorse it. But the question is fair from Clint. Did you ever make drastic changes, like a coaching change? I'm sure you have at some point, but after a successful season, however you would quantify that.
Yes, I did. I don't know if I want to discuss it or not. Okay. I had a defensive coordinator at Western Illinois in year 1. When I heard him, I knew he knew a lot about defense.
Yep.
The only problem is he was philosophy. I'll put it this way: his philosophy at the time was very aggressive football. As he said one time, somebody's band's going to play. It's either going to be our band or their band. If we get to the quarterback, our band will play, and if we don't, their band will play. Well, that's not a great way to play defense. There's a time and a place, of course, to pressure, that's for sure. But don't be predictable with when you do it. But here's the rest of the story. That guy, I told him, you got to go somewhere else. And that guy right now, who will remain nameless, is a defensive coordinator in the NFL right now. And I do give him credit for being a very good defensive coordinator. I don't think he pressures all the time now, though. I think he learned as he got older. Maybe that's not a great idea, but he is an outstanding football coach in terms of X's and O's, and he's making a good living right now as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. I guess if somebody really wants to do their homework, they can figure out who it is, but I don't think it's fair to mention him by name on the air. That's an example. There's another example of a guy I didn't like the way he was coaching, and I had to tell him after the season, I'm not going to allow you to coach that way anymore. And really, all he did wrong, he treated his starting position player better than all the others. And I said, you got to treat them all the same. And he said, Coach, I don't know if I can coach that way. I said, well, you're going to have to coach somewhere else. I'll help you get another job, but I can't allow you to coach the way you've been coaching this year. And so, yes, there are changes that have been made even after a good season. It's not always easy to do, but let's face it, if you're the head coach, your vote should count for more than anyone else's because you have a better idea of what needs to be done next. And maybe that's not what you want to hear because that would suggest that Kirk's vote counts more than any other vote too. But truthfully, Kirk's the head football coach, and it would be logical that he would make the ultimate decision in any and all matters pertaining to Iowa football. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a good answer. And I'm just curious, not again, piggybacking off Clint's question, Don, did you ever have a situation where one of your two units, as a head coach at Western, did you ever have a situation where either your offense or your defense was one of the worst in the FCS?
That's easy. Not even close.
Never. Even in
Never.
some down years. What was your worst
Never.
overall? What was the worst overall record you had as a head coach in a season?
I can't honestly remember. It's all there to be documented. We had consistently good seasons, as you know. I don't think we were ever below the midpoint in terms of offense or defense. Offensively, typically in offense, we were for sure in the top third or the top fourth among all FCS schools. Defense in general, we were high also. We were above average year after year after year. You can go back and look.
2004. 2004, your team went 4-7.
Okay.
And
tell me what our numbers were then. Probably better on offense than defense, I would imagine.
I don't think I'm able to see that. I'm just looking at your Wikipedia page, Don.
Gotcha.
So,
you had to mention that year, Corey, rather than all those years where we won more than we lost.
Sorry, 7-4.
Okay. That's fair.
11-2, 9-4. Yes. But the reason I bring that up is, even if you hadn't made changes that were drastic after a successful season, this is a unique circumstance. And I'm not saying at this point, this conversations, we're just talking theoretical here, but Iowa statistically still has by total offense. And I know Kirk downplays that stat, but Iowa has one of the worst offenses in the country. You could make the argument that it's the second worst offense in the FBS. So that's an extreme situation, an extreme case. And so, and the other thing is, if you're Clint, how do you measure success, Don? He says, if you ever made a fairly big changes after a successful season? Well, Don, is a successful season, would a successful season be 8-4 in a West Division championship, but getting clobbered in a Big Ten title game and you're 8-5? Is that successful? I mean, that's beauty's in the eye of the beholder on this stuff, right, Don?
Right.
So it's a fair question for Glenn. I get his train of thought. Anything else to add on it, Don?
No, you bring up a good point, though. You heard me make the comment the other day. Do you consider it a successful season if we go to Indianapolis again this year? And my initial thought was only if we represent better than we did a year ago.
Right.
It's, because obviously our record is not quite as good. If we go to Indianapolis and represent better than we did a year ago, I would consider it to be a successful season. If we don't represent any better than last year, it's hard to classify it as anything other than not as successful as last season. Because last year, let's not forget, of course, we had a better one-loss record.
All right, let's get to our caller on hold. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. Hey, Don. It's the real MVP. How are you guys doing this Thanksgiving Eve?
Doing good. How are you, Drill MVP? Fresh off a contract extension for the one and only Mr. Mark Stoops.
Yeah, I know. I felt like, Josh Pace suggested this first, but I felt like they were going to announce it after the Vanderbilt game, but, because of the result of that game, maybe they said, they only lost to Georgia by 10. Maybe now is a good time to announce it, but I'm happy for Mark Stoops just because hopefully this puts him out of the running for any of the job openings.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that one loss takes away from what he's done, Don. You know Mark well, and he's done a fantastic job at Kentucky despite playing in one of the best divisions in college football. And Vanderbilt did come back and beat Florida the next week. So Vanderbilt may not be as bad as we all thought, or at least as they've been in recent years. So, Drill MVP, what do you think about the game on Friday, Iowa, Nebraska?
I think Iowa should win the game, and I think Iowa is going to be Big Ten West champs. And then, unfortunately, that's probably where the good news ends, because when they play either Michigan or Ohio State, they'll probably lose by 30 plus. Sorry, Corey, but
you're not hurting my feelings. I don't know why that's. You don't have to apologize. I think there's reason to believe that might happen. I hope it doesn't, but there's a reason to believe it might.
Yeah, Don, let me ask you about this since you were a football coach. When you're in Nebraska, and how do you sell this game? Because you can't make a bowl game. Do you just set it up for next year? What do you do to motivate the players?
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind for me if you're having a disappointing season, you're down to one game. Let's be sure that we finish off our season on the right foot. We can affect the outcome of the West Division race. I'll say it that way. If we can find a way to knock off Iowa, then people will remember that we're the team that knocked them off. And the pressures, here's what a Nebraska coach might say: the pressure's on Iowa to win the game. We don't have any pressure. We don't have to win this football game. And that gives us a chance to just enjoy the moment, realize what a great opportunity it is. Delight in shutting up all those Iowa fans after you make a great play. Since they're on the road, of course, they can talk about quieting 70,000 people all at once. I guess I should say 65,000, because maybe Nebraska is going to have 5,000 there at the most. Probably more like 68,000 versus 2,000, I would imagine. But whatever the case, just remind those guys that the pressure is more on Iowa than it is on us. So for us, let's just go out and have fun. Let's play football like we know how to play. Let's enjoy the moment. Let's play to win and not worry about playing not to lose, because we have nothing to lose. That kind of approach is probably what they're going to hear.
Okay, Andy. So because of that, would you expect more trick plays? Would you expect an onside kick maybe at the beginning of the second half if Nebraska receives the ball? Do you expect those type of things, or do you expect?
You should absolutely expect the unexpected. Yes. Here's a question that's maybe worth addressing. Does Mickey Joseph have a chance to be the next football coach at Nebraska? I would assume that he has a chance to do that, but he has to do something big, maybe against a team like Iowa. So the opportunity is there for him too. If he wants to make a statement about how well he can coach this football team, then it's got to happen on Friday.
Corey, do you have any thoughts about what Don has suggested?
Well, when you brought up the onside kick, I thought of the Northwestern game, and I would have said it at many points in the season. There's no way they do that again, even though there is a different guy running the show. But at this point, I agree with Don. They got nothing to lose. So I mean, why not throw everything you have at Iowa? Mickey, this is a weird situation, Don, because it's not like Mickey Joseph's going to be fired, but he's the interim head coach, and we all know he's not going to be named the head coach. That he hasn't done enough, and there's no question about it. So he understands that. The fans understand that, but they also don't want him fired. He's not. It's just kind of an odd situation, and I just wonder how the players will come around him. But Don, you've observed, and I've observed the same thing. It seems like his players really do love Mickey Joseph.
I think he's a very likable person. Seems to me the players like and respect him. That's a good place to start. I don't know about, of course, you don't have to be a former play caller to be a head coach. I don't know. What was his title beforehand? Was he the OC or not? I'm not sure.
That would have been a better question for Cole. I have no idea.
Yeah. So like you say, he was simply put in charge because he was the guy that was going to be able to manage a difficult situation and keep everybody on the same page, keep everybody united as best one could. I think that's probably why they chose him.
He wasn't OC, I know that because that OC has been Mark Whipple.
That's true. It's a little odd that one of the coordinators wasn't. Of course, he got rid of the coordinator too, didn't he? That's the first thing he did was get rid of the coordinator. Is that right?
Defensive coordinator, yeah.
Right. So isn't it a little bit odd if they were struggling so much on defense and Whipple had such a good reputation? Seems odd to me, and not to mention a former head coach. It seems odd to me that Whipple wouldn't have been put in charge.
So just for the record, according to what I'm reading here, Joseph was the associate head coach, wide receivers coach, and passing game coordinator, which seems odd when you have Mark Whipple.
Yeah, can you imagine Mark Whipple not coordinating the passing game?
That's just strange. So if this information is accurate, it's odd.
Sounds like a title was given to Mickey, and I'm not really sure he earned it. Passing game coordinator. Who we kidding?
I know when you were talking about Corey, the fans weren't expecting him on the staff, and he's just the interim head coach, but he wanted to be retained on the staff. The first thing I thought about was the Auburn job, because Cadillac Williams is in a very similar position. I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with the Auburn head coaching search at all, but people are talking about him as a potential, you've got to look at him type of thing because of him winning some games and bringing life into the program. So, if Nebraska does somehow beat Iowa, maybe they at least have to go through and vet out Mickey,
Yeah, I don't think so. I think those are totally different positions. If Auburn beats Alabama, it's a little different than Nebraska beating Iowa. I don't think there's any way Joseph is retained. Not as the head coach.
I get that, but I think you should do your due diligence and look at all options available.
Sure.
You should never take some guy out of the running just because he might not be the best fit. I mean, I heard Brian Kelly wouldn't be a good fit at LSU. And, if you win games, it doesn't really matter the fit. People just want to win games.
Yeah, you're right.
Corey, let me ask you about this. Do you know why this game's being played on a Friday? I love it from a fan perspective, but is there a history with that or a tradition, or is this happens to be on a Friday?
See, when did it start, Don? Was it 2013, 2014?
It's been quite a while. As I understand it, maybe, I don't know. It's funny you mentioned that. I do know that Kirk likes the idea of playing the game on Black Friday. I think both sides like it. I can't imagine that. Now, maybe you could argue that Nebraska, how could they like it? Because they've lost however many in a row. What is the number 6? I don't even know what it is.
Why do we care? Why does it matter if it's on Black Friday? So for the record, I don't care. And I've never understood why we care if it's on Black Friday. I don't get the appeal.
Well, I'll tell you one part of the appeal. Let's face it, if you're going to recruit like you want to recruit, you need to have eyeballs on you. And one of the beauties of playing on Friday is there are very few games to compete with. Let's
Well-
face it, more people are going to watch this game involving Iowa than any game entire season. That's to include Michigan and Ohio State. I'd be one to, and I say that just because there's no competition. There are very few games on Friday.
Well, I don't want to burst your bubble on this, Don, but there's more games than you think on Friday.
Okay.
You want me to read you some of them?
Tell me which ones are in direct competition with Iowa. Which games come on or about 3?
Okay, let me scroll down here. There's a laundry list of games. Well, how about this one for a juggernaut? New Mexico and Colorado State.
Yeah, that'll draw a crowd.
2-9 versus 2-9. No, in all seriousness, Florida. I guess Florida State's in the later slot. Arkansas, Missouri, North Carolina State, North Carolina, Arizona State. And I guess you're right. That slot is not as packed. You've got number 19, Tulane, number 24, Cincinnati at 11. You got Baylor, Texas at 11. You've got Virginia Tech has been canceled due to the shooting. Florida State's later in the evening. UCLA, Cal. Yeah, I mean, it's there's no question about it. There will be more people watching the Iowa game than probably any other game in that slot. Although North Carolina, Don, that's a game between a 9-2 Tar Heels team and a 7-4 Wolfpack team.
Right, that'll draw a crowd. One thing for sure we can say, if you're a recruit anywhere in the footprint that is defined as the Big Ten, you're going to be watching the Big Ten game on Friday. And we are the only Big Ten game on Friday. So it's going to have a really good audience, especially within the Big Ten viewing area. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, and it's also safe to say that this is probably the most important game that Corey listed, because all the other games is the conference or the division race has already been clinched. So that could draw an additional few eyeballs because there's more stakes on the line.
However, Don, if you're talking about an average fan, a lot of fans aren't flocking to watch Iowa's offense. That's the other problem with a game like this in competition with any other game, because there are football fans out there that would rather watch a high-flying offense, even if it's a 5-6 team over a 7-4 Iowa offense that can't move the football.
Let me counter with this one thing. A lot of casual fans, when they decide to watch a particular game, one of the first reasons they decide to watch that game is they flip to it and they notice all the seats are occupied. Let's face it, in the middle of November, there are going to be a few games this weekend where there are going to be some empty seats. That's not going to be the case in Ankeny. Right? You see empty seats, you're wondering why you're going to watch that game. You're inclined to find one where the place is, because there must be more at stake in that stadium than these other stadiums, because that one's full. You don't like my logic, I can tell.
No, I do. I mean, to an extent. I just know if I'm on, I can just tell you this right now. If I'm not an Iowa fan, I'm not watching Iowa football on Friday. There's Thanksgiving week, college basketball games. There's all kinds of stuff going on. There's holiday football, basketball games across the country on Thursday and Friday. I'm finding other stuff to watch, Don. I'm just telling you that right now.
But one reason some fans would watch is they simply know there's a lot at stake here, because a win puts Iowa in the championship game. How many games can say that this weekend on Friday? Maybe none.
Anything else, Drill MVP?
Corey, I will say your Iowa offense will be a long and vigorous offseason discussion if I had to guess. So just be happy. You're probably going to win the Big Ten West. You'll make a bowl game, and you could be 9-4 or 9-5.
So you are not connected enough with the program, Drill MVP, to tell me that there's going to be a long and vigorous conversation about the offense during the offseason. I can tell you that right now.
No, I'm not connected enough as a fan base, but I do watch enough of the Tuesday shows with Mark Rogers to know that if we put in a pie chart, and Iowa's offense would probably be the largest slice of pie.
Okay, well, I can tell you this right now. I can tell you this right now, buddy boy. Whatever Mark Rogers and I talk about on Tuesday has no impact on Kirk Ferentz and his decision-making. And the more Iowa wins games, the less likely Iowa is to change anything. I'm not saying that I'm in favor and not in favor. That's a fact.
Well, Corey, it's good talking to you and Don as always. Don, thank you for doing this on a Wednesday night. And people, hit the like and subscribe button for them doing this for us. It's very nice of them to do it for us.
Drill MVP.
And thank you guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
We'll talk to you Friday after basketball, all right?
Will do. Good luck against Clemson.
Thank you, sir. I didn't mean to rip Drill MVP. I'm not trying to do that. But, Don, I mean, you've said this on the show. Don't you believe, well, you're not endorsing it one way or the other, but don't you believe that the more wins Iowa gets, the less likely there is to be significant change?
One word answer, yes.
I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, we can argue that all we want, but that's just how things operate. So, it is what it is. All right. We've got Austin, we've got Mike, we've got Cole, who wanted to add something in as well. Pugmaster wants to know if you and I have ever met in person.
I'll let you handle that one.
Why you're letting me handle that one, Don? Don't you know the answer?
I do.
I believe we have met in person a couple of times. Yes,
more than two.
What was your answer to me when you and I first met? Your reaction to seeing me in person for the first time? I think it was the same reaction I had seeing you in person for the first time.
You were taller than I expected.
I said the same about you. I'm like, hey, Don Patterson's a little taller than I expected. So
at least you didn't say my hair was grayer than you expected.
No, I was already familiar with that, Don. No, with all due respect to all of our Pugmaster and all of our questionnaires here in the chat, Don is a very good-looking guy for 70-some years old. Don, I'll give it to you. You've done well for yourself at 71, right? 71.
Soon to be 72.
71, soon to be 72. So, well, we will be right back with Austin, Mike, and Cole. But first, a word from Ascent Nutrition. They have been so gracious so as to sponsor the show this evening. So we'll be right back after a message from our sponsor. Hawkeye fans, let's talk about health and performance optimization for a moment. Our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, offers amazing products. It's actually owned by former Iowa graduate Lance Shuttler. Now, I've decided to partner with Ascent Nutrition because of their unique approach to human health. Ascent offers an organically grown, mold and mycotoxin-free coffee. It provides a pure, clean, and rich flavor without those pesticides that most coffees are treated with. They also offer an algae oil DHA, which is used to support brain health, memory, and focus, as well as proper nervous system development in adults, children, athletes, and even pets. Now, lastly, their unique crafted wild pine pollen is used to support cardiovascular health, hormonal function, and a healthy libido. Your purchase not only supports this channel, but the business of a former Hawkeye. Visit goascentnutrition.com or click the link in the description below and use the code Hawkeyes. That's the code Hawkeyes to receive 15% off your total order from Ascent Nutrition. So appreciate Ascent Nutrition, as always, for sponsoring the content this evening. And we've got Austin on the line. Austin, welcome back to the show.
Hello.
Yeah.
First, I want to start with something that's been grinding my gears since last week's game.
Okay.
I absolutely love how spoiled our fan base is, or Iowa's fan base, I should say, with our defense. To go in and hold a team that averages 28 points per game and hold them down to 10, and to have fans talking about how awful our defense did. That just tickles me pink, that holding a relatively good offense down to 10 points, and that means our defense was terrible. Just tickles me pink that that's the opinion on that.
It tickles him pink, Don. It
Absolutely.
Tickles him pink.
We are so spoiled by a defense, and I love it.
Don, your thoughts on that? I said the same thing. You had your criticisms of Iowa's defense. They did give up a bunch of yards on the ground on Saturday, but 10, as I said after the game, 10 points is 10 points.
Well, no doubt about it. Our basic philosophy, of course, is bend but don't break. And our guys understand never to give up, continue to fight. If it's a 16-play drive and they're still alive with another play to run, then let's find a way to make that 17th play against them. I think the Mo fumble, I believe, was on play 16, wasn't it, as I recall? Almost a 9-minute drive that came to an abrupt end because, and you might argue, if you're a Minnesota fan, you might say, well, why didn't Mo tap out? Why didn't we replace Mo with Potts? Because he had to be a little bit tired. But here's the counter to that. Do you think that Jack Campbell was tired because he played all 16 snaps also?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So let's give Jack Campbell credit for not tapping out either. They're both Warriors and they're both out there playing. Matter of fact, correct me if I'm wrong, they were offensive and defensive MVPs this week in the Big Ten. They both deservedly won that honor. In spite of the fall, Mo earned that honor because he certainly played a great game.
I do feel bad for Mo Ibrahim, though, Don, because I can imagine that he doesn't care about the 200-some yards he ran for in that game because he feels like he blew that game for his team.
You're correct. That's exactly how he feels, I'm sure.
Absolutely, I am sure. Moving on forward, though, to hopefully a West title game. I really appreciate these last few games since we've been feeling like Padilla's been kind of getting into his groove. Our offense has kind of been making some adjustments and playing off. I say getting into a groove. Relatively speaking to the rest of the season, he's been getting into a pretty decent line. One thing I'm noticing that feels good, I haven't had the time to go back and rewatch. When we get him out of the pocket, that's when he seems to have those good bullets and, to me anyway, longer plays and less kind of less wild throws, I suppose. Is that just me, or is that something that you're noticing too, or am I just out of it there? Getting him out of the pocket seems to get him all, for some reason, more accurate.
Don?
Getting him out of the pocket. Well, first off, the only time he really leaves the pocket is on naked. He very seldom leaves the pocket otherwise. Nakeds are typically short throws into the flat, of course. You fake left, you roll right, you flip the ball to a guy that's 10 yards away.
Right.
So I don't think we really work hard to move him around in the pocket. Typically, he's throwing out of the traditional pocket, and of course he might have to slide left or right to buy time, but we very seldom do that much with him in terms of moving the pocket. And that doesn't make us any different than other teams. It's not easy to move the pocket. You do consider doing it, especially if you have difficulty in protecting the normal drop back pass. And that has been a problem for us at times, obviously. So there are situations in which I'll just take you back, Corey, to the Penn State game last year, the winning touchdown. Remember what happened? We faked left, we rolled right, but it wasn't naked. We pulled up and threw the ball back across the field. Remember that?
Yeah.
So that's an example of moving the launch point. We've done very little of that for whatever reason. And obviously it's something that we might consider doing, because if we have trouble defending the traditional pocket, then it makes sense to try to move the quarterback around and develop some different launch points.
I'd be willing to try anything.
Yeah.
I thought I had some other point, but I don't remember him, so I'll let him pass. Super excited to be headed down this week. I wasn't supposed to be going to this game, so I gave my ticket to someone else. And then, because I had to work, and my boss asked, "Hey, are you planning to go to the game? I've got extra tickets for you." And I said, "No, I'm working." So the next day, I said, "Hey, if you're still looking to get rid of those tickets, I'll gladly take them if you can get me the day off." And so now I've got a half day anyway. I'll be making my way down there.
So now you've got somebody else sitting in your seats, but you're sitting in someone else's.
Yep. Well, not my seats. My Mazda season ticket holder. Usually I'm able to make my way up there. So I'll be making the move from south end zone to north end zone to south end zone.
Well, make a lot of noise regardless of what end zone, Austin.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the phone call.
Yep. Y'all have a good night.
Appreciate Austin being here. And let's see here. We've got a couple comments here in the chat. Clint says, since we've won like 17 straight in November, I vote we start the college football college football in November. If games were played November through January, with the CFP being played in places like Lambeau Field, let's get the rest of that comment. We might become the new Alabama. Weather equals muck it up. Weather equals Hawkeye football. You agree with that testament that November and the weather has to do something to do with Iowa's success? And I think part of it's just the schedule, the makeup. You get a Nebraska team that's been maybe the worst program in the division. Illinois was competing for that for a while, but I think don't you think that's a big factor too, Don? They always get with Nebraska, and they just match up well with seem to match up well with Minnesota.
It would be the real test. We should go back and look and see however many games we've won in a row in November, how many of those teams are ranked? I think you're probably right. Very, very few were ranked. So the record is something to be proud of. But if we were knocking off teams that were ranked in the top 10, of course, it would have more significance.
And Paul wants to know, can the Hawkeyes score without Sam Laporta, Don? And if so, how do they do that?
We're going to find out in less than 48 hours. I do have a lot of faith in Sam's backup. Lachey's a good player. He proved that against Minnesota. My concern, though, is if we want to go too tight, and I know you like Ostrenga, and rightfully so, but I would still say that if we're going to go with two tight ends on any particular snap, we're not going to be as strong as we were when those two tight ends were Lachey and Laporta. So I think Sam will be missed, not so much just for making plays, because Lachey can make plays too. He's already proven that. I think we're probably going to miss him more from a leadership standpoint than a production standpoint, because obviously Luke is not the same leader as Sam, and there's no way you could expect him to be. He's a young player that's certainly on a good track right now, but he doesn't have years of experience that Sam has in terms of being able to say the right thing to teammates at all the right times.
And Don, just for the record, I've always liked Addison Ostrenga in this past class. However, I did not expect him to be playing in a meaningful game year one. He didn't even enroll early. I had just simply stated back when he signed, Don, you remember that. I said, I think he's the most underrated recruit in this class. And if I recall, he was ranked nationally like 1,200th best player in the country. Now, I'm not saying he's proven that wrong already, but the fact that he's one of just a few true freshmen who have seen the field this year for meaningful snaps, joining guys like Drew Stevens, Caleb Johnson, Xavier Wampa, it's a testament to the hard work he's put in since fall camp.
Yeah, and I think you would have certainly expected the more likely third tight end rather, would be our transfer from back east, an older player.
Right, exactly. Let's get to Mike, who's been on hold. Mike, welcome back to the show. I hear buzzing. I hear it sounds like you're. Let's see. What does it sound like, Don? Sounds like one of those old analog TVs. Just the buzzing, the humming.
I can't even hear a buzzing.
You know who it's probably Ryan Day. It's probably Ryan Day who's intercepted his signal so that he can get the big Michigan hat on. Nothing, Mike. All right, and we're going to pull Mike out of here, and we'll bring him back here in a little bit. Let's move on to Tony, who's on hold. Tony, the basketball man, is calling in for football. Are you talking football? Are you talking basketball, Tony?
I know a little bit about football. I have a few questions.
Sure.
What is the topic? What are we talking about today?
What's the topic? You don't get the reference, Don. We had our moment with a caller who I don't even know how that caller found the show, but I don't know if he'd been drinking or what's going on. You never know with callers. Who knows? He could have been in Zimbabwe for all we know, Tony.
I had a question for Don. What was it like when you were a head coach, recruiting and keeping on guys that you already knew you had committed and maybe guys could have been tampered with or whatnot? I was kind of segueing into like the Caden Proctor thing. I'm not saying there's tampering, but like Iowa has to keep recruiting him. What
You
was
can't
that
tamper
like
with
as a head
someone
coach?
who's not? You can't tamper with someone who's
Yeah,
not signed.
yeah. The poor choice of words there, but
Sure. Don, your thoughts?
Well, let's face it. The best example I could give you, when I was at Western Illinois, we would typically offer partial scholarships, as you probably know. We have 53 equivalencies. I think they're still at 53 equivalencies, but you can divide them up among as many as 85 players. So the typical high school recruit would be something less than a full scholarship. And you knew, even when he was committed to you, you kind of held your breath because you knew if somebody from FBS football comes along and offers a full ride, you're probably going to lose that commitment. It's really not a fair fight because you were only able to deal in partials, and here they are offering a full ride. So what can you do? It seems like it's unfair, but that's just what happens in FCS football. When you get a commitment, you just hold your breath and you hope that nobody finds out about him that might not be able to be in position to offer him a full ride. If it's FBS versus FBS, of course, you're dealing with nothing but full scholarships. And then you still have to kind of hold your breath because, and I know, Corey, you remember this, we had a running back that was committed to us not too many years ago. And somehow we found out that he was entertaining the idea of going on another official visit. And correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, we called him up and notified him that he no longer had a scholarship.
You know what that is, Don? Let me just sound off on that because that actually kind of upsets me that it's Eno Benjamin, all right? And
Right.
that's called pride. I understand you don't like when a guy goes other places, but seriously, Benjamin's an NFL back now, Don. So how'd that work out for Iowa pulling the guy's offer? I don't approve. I just think that's ridiculous.
I think some people might define that as cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Don.
I'm just going to say our approach with Proctor is obviously different as far as I can tell. We weren't happy that he made another trip. So what can we do? Well, we hold our breath and hope that commitment remains strong as it always was. And in the meantime, all we can do is show him Iowa football and make sure he understands and appreciates how well we play and how we represent ourselves, and he wants to be part of it. And obviously, if we can beat Nebraska, we have a lot to sell too, because here we are playing in another championship game.
Now, I think I saw earlier. Now, I know coaches can't obviously speak about unsigned players, but players can speak about unsigned players. And I thought I saw a video clip of Xavier Wampa, I think. Is that how you say his last name?
Yep.
Earlier this week, pretty much saying he's still recruiting Proctor because those two were high school buddies. And,
contrary to what people want to say on social media, Caden Proctor is still committed to Iowa.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what On3 says and these different recruiting sites, he is still committed to Iowa. And so, yeah, you're right. I did see that as well. Wampa basically said, he has continued to re-recruit Caden and re-recruit Caden. And guess what? That's what Iowa should be doing, in my opinion. I mean, that means taking a slice of, by the way, I'm going to have a piece of pie when we're done with the show, Don, but it involves Kirk Ferentz actually cutting out a slice of humble pie and continuing to recruit Caden even after signing day, because yes, there's tampering going on.
I kind of mentioned that Wampa can mention that because he's a player. How exactly is a short version, I guess, of how those rules can work? Because I know a coach can't talk about a player until he signs, but players really have no. I mean, they can say what they want, obviously, because they're not tied to anything, correct?
Don, players can say what they want about anything.
Yes, they have no restrictions. To my knowledge, they don't.
Nor should they. Nor should they.
Yeah,
I'm not saying.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying they should. I was just asking. You would know the ins and outs more than I would about something like that. That's what I was asking. I'm not advocating that they should, Corey, at all. I was just asking, for clarification. That they can.
Yeah, and the same thing is happening with basketball. One of my favorite things about Fran McCaffrey is you know this, Tony, because you're a basketball guy. When he's asked about anything about officials, even if it's a question that he could probably get away with answering, he loves to sit there at the post-game press conference and say, say it's Mike Halas that asked him a question. I can't talk about that, Mike. And then Mike will say, well, did the ref give you an explanation? You can answer that question.
Yeah.
You can he give you an explanation. Mike, I can't talk about that. That's what he'll say, and I just always get a kick out of it. But players, I mean, we've seen guys like Jordan Bohannon and the McCaffrey sons. They can say whatever they want. So the same can be said for these restrictions. You cannot tell. That would be, you are treating the players like prisoners at that point if you don't allow them to speak. I mean, that makes no sense to me. But you're right. I mean, it's a totally different line in the sand for the coaching staff.
Go ahead, Don.
I was just thinking to myself, I do think it's interesting. And I'll give you the example that comes to mind for me would be Illinois at Michigan last weekend. Isn't it interesting that Coach Bielema invented a little bit after the game? And of course, as a close personal friend of Brett's, I'm sitting there thinking, I hope he doesn't end up having to pay for this in terms of Big Ten action. But what was interesting to me, even though I'm sure, and I do think that Brett had a reason to be annoyed with the officiating, because I do think they came out on the short end of that stick. But isn't it interesting, to my knowledge, none of the Illinois players suggested that. It's just interesting that the players, to their credit, aren't conditioned to blame the officials. You very seldom hear a player say, I think we got screwed by the officials. You don't hear that. And good for them that they can be above that. A football coach has the right to voice his opinion if he's upset, but of course, in the real world, he might pay a price for that too. So I don't know that that'll happen to Brett. I hope not, because I would hope that the Big Ten would realize it was a very difficult week for Brett and a very emotional loss of his mom, and then to lose on a last-second field goal is two unfortunate occurrences all in the same week.
And Don, just real quick to segue off this, Tony, I don't mean to steal your time here, but
Oh, you're fine.
that was one of the most touching moments to listen to Brett after the game. And I got a little choked up listening to him because it was purely authentic. And your heart goes out to Brett, and he's a Hawkeye, and you know how much that game meant to him. And boy, his mom would be proud at that performance, what he was able to get his guys to do. And I'm happy for Brett. I mean, I know Illinois being successful is, I guess, bad for Iowa in a sense. But look, I'm happy for Brett Bielema. He's a good guy, Don. Everything you've ever said about him has been positive.
Absolutely.
Tony?
I wanted to add on to something Don said. I know, Corey, we talked about this on those things, the last basketball show about officiating. And I did some officiating. It was in soccer, granted, not football. But I did, high school and D3 games, stuff like that. I think some of the reasons that you may not hear the players say that is, I remember I literally go up to a player and say, they'd come and talk to you and stuff like that. And I'd be like, I missed it. And I'd be completely honest with them as official. I was like, sorry, I missed it. I'll just try to do better. And I think players accept that a lot more than maybe the outside noise outside of the field of play, because they're in there with you on the field of play. So that might be a reason maybe why you don't hear the players say it as much, that they blame the officials. And
for the record, I will say this: it was just never in my my vision, I guess, for myself. The little bit of officiating I did, we're talking like the rec league level officiating, like nothing legitimate. But Don, it would have been something that I would have, given my personality, had no problem doing at the high school level or something. And I just never pursued that. But I do try to sympathize with officials, not because of any experience, but just because I understand what you're saying, Tony. In that moment, it's easy for us to sit back and make a call. And that's why I kind of came to the officials' defense that called Jack Campbell out on Saturday, because I'm just thinking in that split second, I understand, and Kirk made a point of saying this on Tuesday, you want to let that play happen before reviewing it and potentially calling it back. But I'm just thinking, if I'm the official and I'm seeing the kid's foot go out, I'm going to blow that whistle. And once you blow the whistle, the play's dead. You can't take it back. You can't take back the blown whistle. And it just, I'm telling you, and I even remember, again, at the little level that I did basketball officiating, accidentally blowing your whistle in a moment. Now, again, I was not a seasoned Big Ten official, but so I understand there is a difference there. But these guys do have difficult jobs.
You're right. I've always publicly said I think officiating basketball is an impossible assignment. I even heard a veteran basketball coach one time just kind of routinely comment, and he said they get their calls right about 70% of the time. It's a difficult game to officiate because everybody demands an immediate whistle. Well, how do you make those snap decisions in hundredths of a second? You don't have very long to process what just happened, and yet that's what people expect.
And Tony, real quick, not to segue off this some more, and I know we're not even talking about Iowa, Nebraska, but am I the only one that sort of kind of likes when Fran gets mad?
Oh, I love it.
I don't want him to get teed up. I don't want to see him get thrown, or I certainly don't want him to have a stroke or have a health issue as a result of getting angry, because he's been, Don, you've seen it in moments. You watch Iowa basketball. There have been moments where I've had people observe to me, man, I hope he doesn't have a stroke. And certainly you don't want that to happen because he's toned things down in recent years. But there is something about Fran getting fired up that I do appreciate it. But anyways, that's just.
Let's face it, you can read it all over his face. When Fran starts getting a little red-faced, he's upset with the officials.
Absolutely.
And it's a little different in soccer, but I have literally had coaches say, throw me out, throw me out. That's what they're yelling at me. They're not yelling at me because they're mad at a call. They want to get their team fired. So, sometimes that's the conversations that you see fiery going on, that they're not even yelling at you. They're pissed off. They want to be thrown out because they know what that'll do to the team they're coaching. It's a motivational tactic.
There is some of that, yeah. I mean, let's not forget, and we can go full circle here and then move on from the subject, but 2015, Iowa goes 12-0. What was the 12th game? It was a close win against Nebraska. And if you recall, Don, Kirk had one. I have seen Kirk get mad very few times. He was absolutely irate. That was the game where he threw his hat, not at the official, but and he got a warning, a sideline warning. He may have actually gotten an unsportsmanlike as well. You don't see that from Kirk often, but there was a call that he absolutely did not agree with. I don't remember what the call was. I think it was an offsides or an offsides that wasn't called or something like that. So, these, late November games, there's a lot on the line and no different on Friday, Tony.
Thanks for your time, guys. And maybe I'll try to take part in both call-in shows if I can stay up late enough after the basketball call-in show. And
that's the
hopefully,
real question. We're all talking about, well, can I make it through two shows? I want to know about the fans, because they're already going to be watching, Don. They're already going to be watching a 3.5-hour football game. Then you got a 2-hour basketball show. I mean, are the fans going to be able to make it through all this? So,
well, I would hope so, because I don't think anybody has to set their alarm early for Saturday morning.
It's true.
Right? Stay up with us because you can always sleep in.
There you go. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
I'll just end on one thing. You know how the fans can stay up, right, Corey? They can get some of that Ascent coffee, and that'll keep them up.
Words out of my mouth, Tony. I'll mention the Lansing, his brand, and expert.
Tony's got a future in marketing, I think.
There you go.
We'll see you guys on Friday.
Thank you. All right. We got a few comments in the chat before we continue. Michael, thank you for being a premium subscriber. And he adds here, I'm going to direct this more to you, Don. Thank you, Don, for having a show tonight. Fun way to spend the evening. And I'll tell you this, Don, I appreciate you hopping on with us, because this is a show that, I enjoy interacting with the fans here, but it's better when we have a mind like you on here that can talk Hawkeye football. And what better night to do it, but 2 nights before the final regulars. It just, isn't it weird how this season goes by so fast? I mean, you coached at this level for so long, but the season comes, the season goes, and then it's such a long wait to bring it back.
Yeah, so you have to look forward to the weekends that involve football, because so much of the year you don't have that. You're right. You're exactly right. One thing I want to mention, Corey, because I know you agree with me. Isn't it interesting how in so many cases we talk to people, sometimes the same people week after week after week, and it's almost as if you develop a friendship. You develop an understanding of where they're coming from and where you're coming from. They understand that too. And you actually develop, we all have one thing in common. We all love the game of college football. Or to be more specific, we love the Hawkeye brand of college football. So it's kind of neat that we can all reconnect, at least on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. Ari Gold says, is Keegan Johnson ever going to play for Iowa again? Great question, Don.
I don't have an answer.
I don't have the answer either. And if I am a fan right now, here's what I'm concerned about. You can be concerned all you want about Brian Ferentz and what's going to happen with the offense. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about, Don. I'm a bit concerned with retaining the skill position guys they have. And I'm not talking about Caleb Johnson. I expect him to come back. He's a second-year guy. I'm talking guys like Arlen Bruce. I'm talking guys like Keegan Johnson. Those are really the two guys that who else? Reganey's going to be graduating.
Right.
Boy, you were to, and I'm not saying I have any reason to believe that Arlen Bruce is going to leave or that Keegan Johnson is leaving, but Don, you lose those two guys. I don't want to say desperate, but boy, that wide receiver room looks extremely thin next year.
Yeah, and another angle relating to all that, Corey, is talking about recruiting. What aspect of our offense can you effectively sell? It's a concern, because you can bet that rival schools are mentioning how frequently or infrequently certain people get the ball. So it is a concern. You can sell them on playing opportunity, but the more difficult sell is sell them on the style of play. That's a more difficult assignment.
Mark says a fake field goal by Iowa would be nice to see. What are the odds of that happening? Slim and none, and Slim just left town. What do you think, Don?
Mark, you're one of my best friends. I appreciate you sharing that. Coach Fry would be pleased.
Was that a Coach Fry? Was that a Fryism, Don?
Yes, that was a Hayden Fry expression.
And I repeated it, but I didn't know it was a Fryism.
Yes. Slim and none, and Slim left town. Just left town. Exactly right. Here's the only thing, Mark. Let's just take you back to the infamous onside kick on Nebraska's part against Northwestern. You don't just arbitrarily call a fake field goal. The more difficult part is, can you assess for sure that it's there? You have to make it be there. Scott Frost's mistake, he called an onside kick against Northwestern, and it wasn't even close. So it's kind of hard to imagine that there was anything that happened that would have prompted him to call an onside kick. Maybe that had something to, it was just unfortunate that it happened if you're a Nebraska fan, because it wasn't even close to being a recovery for Nebraska. And I do recall that Northwestern went right down the field and scored.
Ray Owens wants to know if Lane Kiffin will end up at Auburn. Don, you have an answer on that?
I don't know. That's a good question. And as I know it, things are still going pretty well at Ole Miss.
I don't know about that.
Of course, Auburn may have more reasons to hire a guy than Ole Miss. Maybe they can afford to pay him a little more. I'd be disappointed in Lane Kiffin if he doesn't have great loyalty to Ole Miss, because they've certainly been good to him. It works both ways. You develop loyalty in your coach by how you treat him and how you pay him. And I'd like to believe that he develops a loyalty to the fan base and to the university for which he works. I know it always didn't work that way for me, and certainly it worked that way for Hayden. And I think it's worked that way for a lot of people. I certainly think that Kirk has great loyalty to Iowa, just as Iowa has shown great loyalty toward Kirk. So it works in both directions.
Absolutely. Let's try to get Mike back in here. Mike, can you hear us? Can we hear you? No. I'll tell you what, Mike. Here's what you need to do, buddy boy. You need to pull up your settings on StreamYard, and you'll be able to click on audio. And if your mic's not showing up and it's not transmitting into StreamYard, you will not see a little green bar going across. Once you get that green bar going across, you'll know you're good on our end as well. But you keep trying, and I'll get you back in here.
I have a question for you, Corey. Is Mike aware that the reference of Buddy Boy might not be as complimentary as he might think?
It's not an insult, Don. I promise you it's not an insult.
It's not a compliment either, I don't believe. somewhere in between.
No, what are you talking about, Don? You know that Gary Dolphin is known
I know
for
he's
calling,
always referencing Podolak with Buddy Boy,
always
so I
calling
guess
Cody.
it's an okay thing. At least I
Where-
know when Dolph refers to Ed as Buddy Boy, that's not a bad thing.
Exactly. And it's not a bad thing for me to Mike or me to drill MVP. So don't listen to Don on that. This is the one thing I'm going to push back on you, Don. Don't listen to
I
Don.
do. That's more than fair. Let's move on to another subject. I do appreciate what Erica says. We have friends on both ends. Friends on our end and friends relating to all those people that are nice enough to watch us and listen to us.
Absolutely. Appreciate the super chat, Erica. And yes, Mark and his channel is a hoot and a great time as well. So anybody who's on with us here this evening, certainly check out Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, his content, including our Iowa content. Dragon says, Don, you're my buddy boy. Let's get to...
I'll take that in the best possible way.
There you go. Randy wants to know, Coach Patterson, what will Iowa do offensively to turn this Friday game into a track meet? Well, they don't want it to be a track meet, Don. I
agree. Here's what I hope for. I hope, and think back to the Purdue game. One of our best strategies for Purdue would be to do what we could to keep Purdue's offense on the sideline. How do we do that? We do that by running the football effectively, making first downs, chewing up clock, eating up field position, scoring on long, sustained drives. I would like to believe that we can do the same thing on Friday. May not be as easy, but that's certainly a logical goal on our part. I do know from looking at the analytics, that's a pretty good philosophy on how to control Nebraska. Try to string together a lot of first downs, run the ball effectively, have more plays than Nebraska, have more time of possession than Nebraska. Obviously, to do all that, you got to protect the ball well. I'll say it this way. If you can possess the ball for 35 minutes, that doesn't guarantee a win against Nebraska because we know they can score in a short amount of time sometimes, but that's a great way to start is by leaving their offense on the bench and making first downs versus a defense that is not as good as some we've played this year. That's for sure.
Let's get to our next caller who's on hold. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout. Who's on the line?
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good evening. Coach Patterson, I've always wondered something. Recruits come into the game and the fans are sitting there booing. I wondered, that can't be a good look for the University of Iowa, is it?
No, it's not. I've always said fans have that right, but I certainly wish they would consider the effects that relate to that booing, whether or not it might turn off a recruit, whether or not it might be a detriment to the play of that particular player, just adds to the pressure of the game, those kind of things. I think that's a valid comment. I've said that before, Corey, to you. They have the right to boo, but I still wish they wouldn't because in Spencer's case, he's trying as hard as he can. Nobody can question his commitment to Iowa football. They might not be happy with how he's playing on any particular moment. And as you've heard me say so many times, if things aren't going well, then the quarterback gets more blame than he deserves. And certainly in those kind of games, Spencer was unfairly blamed for some of the things that happened. But it goes with the territory. If you're going to play quarterback, you have to be aware of that and understand it and be able to not let it affect how you play.
And Don, let me just say this. I really don't want fans to boo on Saturday or on Friday if things go wrong. This is Spencer Petras' senior day. I don't think he's coming back next year. That will be very unfortunate if he gets booed on Friday. Caller?
Yeah. It's, as far as this Caden Proctor deal goes, I watched that video and Xavier said he was encouraging Caden to take his visits. I can't imagine the coaching staff being real happy with that. But as far as I'm concerned, and I'm 66 years old, I'm old school. When he said he was coming to the University of Iowa, and this is just my opinion, you made a commitment to the university and you stick with it. If you wanted to take more visits, in my opinion, you shouldn't commit until you decide that this is where I want to go. And, you know, as far as I would be concerned, I would be done. I wouldn't be taking any more visits, but then I'm old school.
Let me ask you this. Caller, I didn't get your first name. I want to be able to refer to you properly.
John.
John, let me ask you this, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I think Don probably agrees with you, but let me ask you this. If you were in Caden Proctor's shoes, and I'm not saying he felt this way, but let's just play devil's advocate. Let's play the kind of a theoretical game here for a second. If you're Caden Proctor and you expected the Iowa offense to improve based on what the coaches were telling you, you committed to Iowa prior to the season starting, and you watch your side of the football come out and some of the numbers would suggest that this is maybe the worst offense in the FBS. At that point, you're not signed. Are you guaranteeing that you wouldn't at least consider looking around at that point, given the fact that maybe the unit is not what you expected it to be, that it's not what the coaches promised you that it would be?
If it was me, I probably would have waited till the end of the season and seen how it went before I gave a commitment.
Okay, yep, that's a fair line of reasoning. He shouldn't have committed when he did. That's a fair line of reasoning, Don. I respect that from John.
Absolutely.
Corey, can I ask? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Don.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. That was, I would have probably been, as you said, I would have not committed until I knew that I'd made up my mind correctly, and that would involve making more than just a trip or two.
Corey, can I ask a women's basketball question real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
I've watched Iowa women's basketball for I don't know how many years now, maybe 8, 10, something like that. And The thing that always mystifies me is the Iowa women's program always seems to have a problem with rebounding, defense, and turnovers, but yet they never seem like they work on their weaknesses.
Well,
I want to hear your answer to that one, Corey, because we've had this discussion before.
Yeah. First of all, John, that's a great question, and Don knows that I am a women's basketball fan. I love watching the Iowa women play. I watch every game that I can, but you are in large part right. I think the women have a bigger problem with defense than the men do. Say what you want about Fran McCaffrey. Say what you want about Fran. His team has improved defensively these last couple of years, and you can say, well, it's because of individuals and the athletes he's gotten to come here. Well, fine. He's recruited in order to help solidify the perimeter D, stopping the ball. I mean, there's a number of things, and they've struggled on the boards as well. I think they're going to struggle on the glass at times this year, but I've been critical. If you've heard my breakdowns of the Iowa women, John, it frustrates me when I hear Lisa Bluter after a road win against Drake, in which they gave up 86 points, albeit in an overtime session, but 82 in regulation. It frustrates me to hear Lisa Bluter talk about how our offense could have done this, and we didn't make these shots. Why don't we talk about rebounding for a second? Why don't we talk about defense? I mean, I was at that game in the Knapp Center, and they couldn't stop a Bulldog to save their lives. And that is frustrating to me. And I don't give Lisa any bigger I don't give Lisa a bigger pass because she's a woman or because it's a woman. I mean, she deserves the criticism that Fran deserves. If she's not getting it done in a certain area, she deserves the same criticism, in my opinion. So I feel the same way as you do. And they are not the 4th best team in the country, Don. I'm telling you that right now. I haven't said that in this program. They are not the 4th best team in the country.
You would argue primarily because of a mediocre defense or an average defense.
Yeah, they really don't play. They really don't play defense consistently or effectively. Gabby Marshall is a liability. I hate to say that. I said the same thing about Jordan Bohannon. It's nothing against her personally. But John, do you see the same thing?
Well, it's I'm probably going to butcher her name, Monica the center,
Sonano.
the 5 position.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching last year, and a guard come up to her, and she was standing in front of the basket with her hands straight up in the air, and the guard went around her and scored. The ball was going through the hoop, and she's still standing there with her hands above her head. I mean, I know she makes, she gets a lot of rebounds and gets a lot of points, but somebody has said, and I'm certainly not a basketball expert, but that the Iowa women lack the foot speed, the quickness.
Well, part of that's coaching. Don, you know this. You can can't we turn this back into a football conversation for a second? Can't you work on foot speed? I mean, I know some of that's natural, but aren't there drills and different things that can increase lateral quickness and foot speed?
Absolutely. And you've heard me say this, Corey, identifying it in football as 3 games within one, right? Your offense versus the opposing defense, vice versa, and the kicking game. Well, let's face it, basketball, they're really 2 games. Your offense versus their defense, and then when they have the ball, how does your defense match up against their offense? So wouldn't it be logical that it'd be a lot easier to win games if you were above average in both?
Yeah, I agree with you, John, and I love Monica. And get the comment about Gabby Marshall. I don't want that to be misconstrued. I'm sure she's a tremendous leader. She does give you something offensively, but she's just undersized and not the greatest athlete at this level and struggles to defend guards. And she's starting on a team that's ranked number 4 in the country, and I think that's going to be a bugaboo and a problem. And my big thing, John, is I just want to hear it. Just like I begged of Fran McCaffrey for several years, I just want to hear you say after the game, we lost because we didn't defend anybody. And it seemed like for a while, Don, and I've always appreciated how Fran goes about his business, but it did frustrate me for a stretch of time when I didn't hear Fran McCaffrey openly talk about he would kind of do the same thing that Lisa would do and bring up, well, we missed too many shots. If we're making shots, they're not able to get out in transition. Well, let's just talk about our lack of half-court defense. Let's talk about our lack of rebounding. But Fran, I think, has come around, and I want to see that. I would challenge Lisa to be a little bit more open, and maybe she's doing that behind closed doors. We're not really seeing it on the court. I would challenge Lisa to be a little bit more outward when she's speaking to the public, because these are women. I mean, these aren't girls. These are women, just like the men are men. If they're not playing defense, they're not playing defense. And I mean, we need to call a spade a spade. That's how I feel about the situation, John.
Well, I think I heard on the interviews with the women's basketball team, and I hope I'm not wrong, that one of the players said Lisa will never sacrifice offense for defense. And it's, to me, you got to play some defense.
Yeah.
You can't just have the Olay defense or the Matador defense, what they call it. And I'm not saying they do that. I mean, maybe they're doing as well. And I don't mean to be critical. I like Lisa Bluter as the coach. I don't think I'd want to see anybody else in there. And I just want them to play better defense, so when they run up the site against the South Carolinas and the top 5 teams, they're not going to get carved up like a Christmas turkey.
Absolutely. I agree with you, John.
Isn't it safe to say, Corey, that the best way to win a basketball game is to win the game on both ends of the court?
Yeah, we were really into extremes at the University of Iowa and in the state of Iowa. We've got extreme weather. You've got a football team that doesn't play offense but plays defense. You've got a men's basketball team that in recent years has been known to really be offense heavy. Same with the women. There's not a whole lot of balance there, but it is possible to have a balanced basketball team and a balanced football team. Is it not, Don?
Yes, it is. And think of it this way. I know that Coach Brazier used to say, it's difficult to always outscore someone because, let's face it, and Ohio State's a good example. Some of the best Ohio State teams, they didn't seem to really care too much about defense. Well, that's okay. You can outscore people until you turn the ball over 3 times, and then you're in trouble, because you thought you were going to be converting every other drive for a touchdown. You thought if you had to outscore them, you could. Well, if you turn the ball over a few times, you got a problem because you don't have much margin for error. How much easier is it to win a football game if you defend your goal line really effectively all day long? That's what we do. And that's sometimes when we win, it looks a little bit ugly, but it's still a win.
Anything else, John?
Just real quick, talking about Frank McCaffrey getting red in the face. I said to him at a nightclub meeting one time, I said, I'm worried about you. And he goes, why is that? And I said, I'm afraid you're going to have a stroke. And he goes, I'll be all right.
How did Fran? What did Fran say?
He goes, I'll be all right.
At least he didn't get red-faced when you were talking to him.
Oh, that happened. The first time I ever met him, I used to go up to the coach's call-in show and sit in the audience, and he walked out the door at the same time I did one time, and I asked him, I said, on the 3-2 zone, why do we keep leaving the three-point line wide open? Because, they'll pack it in. And he stopped and he looked at me and his face got red. And he goes, that's because I haven't read the scouting report. And I thought, oh, God, he's going to tear into me. I pissed him off.
John, I like you. Call in anytime, sir.
All right. Have a great Thanksgiving, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I enjoy that, Don. I enjoy stories like that. I like it. All right. Well, we will we'll carry on from there. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more from our callers in the last 20 minutes or so of our show. We'll try to limit this to around 2 hours. Then we've got people who are calling in still. So we'll be back with more here. I'm going to put our caller on hold, and we'll be back with more here on Hawkeye Hangout featuring the one and only Coach Don Patterson. You may have heard of the real-life Hawkeye man cave known as Kinnick Under the Kitchen. Well, after lots of hard work, there's not much space left to paint, but the walls are exploding out for public consumption. Under the Kitchen is proud to announce that you can now purchase exclusive prints of some of your favorite Hawkeye legends, including wrestling great Spencer Lee, football players Arlen Bruce, Riley Moss, and Tavian Banks, plus an all-in-one Murray family legacy print featuring Keegan, Chris, and Kenyon Murray himself. Signed and unsigned prints are available, making the perfect collectible or gift for any Hawkeye enthusiast. For more information on purchasing one of these outstanding Hawkeye prints, visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook. That's Under the Kitchen on Facebook. Hawkeye fans, let's talk about health and performance optimization for a moment. Our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, offers amazing products. It's actually owned by former Iowa graduate Lance Shuttler. Now, I've decided to partner with Ascent Nutrition because of their unique approach to human health. Ascent offers an organically grown, mold and mycotoxin-free coffee. It provides a pure, clean, and rich flavor without those pesticides that most coffees are treated with. They also offer an algae oil DHA, which is used to support brain health, memory, and focus, as well as proper nervous system development in adults, children, athletes, and even pets. Now, lastly, their unique crafted wild pine pollen is used to support cardiovascular health, hormonal function, and a healthy libido. Your purchase not only supports this channel, but the business of a former Hawkeye. Visit goascentnutrition.com or click the link in the description below and use the code Hawkeyes. That's the code Hawkeyes to receive 15% off your total order from Ascent Nutrition. All right, let's see if we get Mike back into the show. Last try, third time's the charm. Mike, what do they say? 3 times a lady. Oh no, he strikes out. He strikes.
Mike, is Jim Harbaugh your sound engineer?
Yeah, he struck out. Bye, Mike. All right, let's continue with this, Don. You see on the bottom ticker, special announcement coming up. Special announcement coming up here in just a couple of minutes. We've got a caller here who is on hold. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Lomansky on the phone, Corey.
Lomansky, how are you, sir?
Good. Happy Thanksgiving to you both. I wish you both high porch picnics tomorrow.
Thank you, Lomansky. Are you staying warm up in Wisconsin? What's the weather like up in your area. It's a nice 40-degree, weird for the Black Friday week, or I should say Nebraska week weather.
Yeah, the Nebraska fans are smiling right now. They might not be smiling at kickoff. Let's hope that changes.
Amen, brother.
Well, I want to compliment you both on the service you've done to Iowa fans all year long. It's appreciated. It's meaningful. I'm very thankful that we have a legacy to protect. I'll give just a quick couple of things, and especially not only alumni at the University of Iowa that got C's and tests and thought they had to have a tutor and what will they ever graduate or not, but those roots go deep. I remember going by the Iowa Memorial Union, and I'm going back to the legacy we get to protect. And there was a gentleman in sunglasses in first year he coached, and just happened to go by the Union at lunchtime, and he was sitting on a bench, and he had a bunch of people around him. That guy was Mr. Hayden Fry, talking about his program. So I made frequent trips down there to see how often on a Friday or a Thursday he would do that. And when his first year, he was down there talking to the student body. And Corey, you talked about taking care of the student body at basketball. Hayden Fry took care of the student body before he ever played a game. And I used to get a sandwich and listen to that guy. And that's leadership. And I think leadership will serve us well Saturday. Do either one of you have Irish descent?
I do not. I don't believe. Don?
I think I have a little bit of Irish in me, as I recall. Yes.
I don't know if Don remembers this, but some of our older Hawks do. But a referee by the name of Jim Bain made a call at the end of the game, and Lute Olson chased him into the dressing room. He, in full view of the public, saw him run down the tunnel after Jim Bain. That was a pretty famous story. And Lute was Norwegian. Us Norwegians are supposed to be kind of calm, but maybe we're not. But I appreciate a coach who doesn't get too high or low. But a story about Irishmen, and this is kind of backing Fran McCaffrey, and Corey's used to be backing Fran McCaffrey at every turn. When I was in college, we used to go home to Northeast Iowa to the wedding dances. And the ones we really made sure we never missed were the Irish ones. So one night at an Irish wedding, the groom and the bride were at the bar, and they were drinking a pretty good amount, celebrating. And all of a sudden, they got in a fight. And the dance, they left the dance. The bride left the groom at the bar, and the bride went with the girls and took off. And us college guys were standing around, and we've been to Iowa City nightlife. And, you know, how could you have the Iowa City nightlife up here in Northeast Iowa in the farm community? And this older guy, he was about 75. He'd been standing alone all night long, and he walked over to us 20-year-old guys and said, "Gentlemen, that marriage will last. You got to learn how to mix it up in sports and mix it up with your spouse. And if you can do that, that'll be one of the best marriages you guys have ever seen." So I don't mind Fran getting a little ticked once in a while. I kind of like it.
Don, did you ever? Can I ask you just to piggyback off that? Did you have moments as a head coach at Western? What's the maddest you ever got at Western as a head coach at an official? Did you? I don't see you as a guy that would ever lose your mind. Did you ever throw a headset or anything like that?
No, I do have a story that I can tell. After my first year, and we had a good team, but we lost a few games. I don't remember the record. You could look it up, Corey, because you're really good at that. Maybe we were 7-4 or something. I don't remember, but I know we didn't make the playoffs. And that next spring, I was up watching Wisconsin practice. Alvarez was their head coach, of course, and he asked me, he said, "What was your biggest problem in year one?" And I thought for a minute, and I said, "I guess I'd have to say the officials." And he said, "Well, you didn't think they were going to let you come in and take over the league, did you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, how'd you react?" And I said, I yelled at him a lot in the first few games. But then I realized it's not helping. So after that, I just tried to kill him with kindness. And he said, "You did the right thing, because it's never going to get you very far." And then fast forward, I was working for CBS over in the John Deere Golf Tournament one year, and I ran into a guy that was a former referee in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Back then, it was called the Gateway Conference. And I don't think you'd mind me telling you his name. Even his name was John Sullivan, one of the best officials in the entire conference. And he volunteered years later after we were done with our coaching. He said, I always told my referees, my other officials, I should say, always told my officials, if Coach Patterson complains, you better listen to him because he's probably right. And the reason he said that, I think, is I always made it a point, don't ever show up an official. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have a discussion with them. Just don't have a lot of wild gyrations when you're doing it. You can talk to them, but it won't even be obvious to the fans that you're having a heated discussion with them because you're not showing it physically, but your words are being heard differently than what your expressions show. And that's a good way to approach it because invariably, if you simply point out to the officials, hey, John, just so you know, you guys missed that holding call. And you can't bring it up every other play, of course, but if you truly recognized that they missed a call, they might even acknowledge it among themselves. We had a basic rule and we had a wonderful supervisor of officials. And his challenge to the officials always was make it be there. In other words, don't guess. If you're not sure there was a foul, then don't throw your flag. When you throw your flag, you have to know for a fact that there was a foul. And that's exactly what you could hear Brett complaining about last week. The officials even went back and looked at it, and the announcers even said, you know what, that's a really suspect call. It was a holding call on an offensive lineman, and it was a phantom call. And shortly thereafter, you could see Brett having a discussion on the sideline. He wasn't yelling and screaming and gyrating. He was simply saying to the official, I got one request of you. Just don't give us phantom calls. Just make sure that it's a valid flag. That's all I'm asking. I think Brett had that very conversation, and that is the right approach. There's nothing wrong with pointing out to the officials, just so you know that was a bad call. And I wouldn't say that except it's being supported with the guys upstairs that had a very better vantage point than any of us down here. As long as you treat them with respect and dignity, they appreciate that because some guys do try to embarrass them or show them up, and nobody appreciates getting verbally assaulted during the game, especially if it's obvious just by your demeanor that that's what's happening. So you can be talked to them in what appears to be a conversational tone, and yet the words you're saying are the appropriate words to let them know that they missed a call.
Don?
Yes. Bo Pelini, prime example of not how to act.
And he was, listen, Bo, right? Because he was on your staff for a year.
Yes, I do. And of course, Bo, why do you let go of a coach that was 9-3 year after year after year? I guess because you don't really like how he acts in public. And Bo had a real temper, and he wasn't afraid to show it.
Lomansky?
I'll leave you with this and hang up. If you want some holiday entertainment, it's on YouTube. And I can't remember the label of it, but it's Hayden Fry at a press conference, and I can't remember if they said it was an upset press conference or towards the end of his career, and they're talking about he had a lot of injuries, and he kind of goes after the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And we watch the Iowa football team, and we almost think they're professional players. They play so well, and we forget they're youngsters. And I think Hayden, in his press conference to the Iowa media, called his team youngsters about 27 times, and he kind of lets them have it. And if you want some holiday cheer, just listen to Hayden. Keep it between the rails. And Don knows this so well, but the guy could go right into the ditch and not quite go in and come out and make his points so eloquently. And I remember the days of wanting that indoor practice facility. And he hit him in the pocketbook pretty good, and he didn't really threaten to leave. But the smart people, and Don probably lived that turmoil because, he was trying to get facilities to compete with Michigan, Ohio State, and he had beaten UCLA in his second year. And he'd beaten Nebraska in his second year. And I remember thinking, if the Iowa administration isn't smart enough to know this, Hayden, you leave, and God bless you. And I guess during the portal, these guys are youngsters, and football's changed. And I guess, you know, Corey, you said it so well. When we lost our wide receiver to Purdue, we wish him well. And they're youngsters, and they got their life to live. And Lomansky sitting out here in Wisconsin like an idiot, not in Iowa City. We got to accept it's their life to live, and I can't live totally vicariously through the Hawks, but I sure damn try. Happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays, gentlemen.
Thank you, Lomansky. Appreciate the phone call, sir. This show has went a lot of different places, Don. I mean, I've enjoyed it. This has been a kind of a unique show, and I guess they don't call it Hawkeye, or we don't call it Hawkeye Hangout for nothing. So I've enjoyed this the wide variety. So we've got Vincent, we've got Cole, but I've been teasing this special announcement for a while now, and I actually really, if people pay attention and are watching this channel regularly, you knew this was coming. We have got merch, people. Merch has dropped. So I'm just going to let everybody know here. If you've been on the show for the last couple hours, you probably haven't refreshed.
Corey, I lost you.
All right, let's try that again, Don.
I'm sorry, I lost you. I lost you at the worst possible time.
I think everybody lost me, and I think am I coming in loud and clear now?
Your face is frozen, but I heard you.
Okay, coming in loud and clear.
Now you're good. Yes, you're good.
Somebody doesn't want me to get through this announcement, I guess. We have got merch, people. I'm gonna make that clear. Merch. We can say it over and over again. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, you can either refresh the stream. So hit the refresh button, or if you're on your phone, you don't want to do that. I'm going to put the link in our live chat. But later on, our merch link, our merch shop is going to be available in every description for every video on this channel. All right? So I'm going to throw this up in the live chat right now. Merch is now available by following this link. All right? We've been having people asking about merch for quite some time. Appreciate the Johnny O Show for helping us to get this available. But more is coming. I'll just say that more is coming. So we've got the merch, and we've got I want to call it preliminary merch, but a wide variety. And in fact, let me just go ahead and share my screen. Watch my screen freeze up again when I do this, Don. But I'm going to share my screen here. The one thing we don't have yet, let's see if I can find this. We do not have a cowboy hat for Don.
I'm okay with that.
That's the one thing we don't. All right, so just so everybody's aware, we've got men's clothing and accessories, women's clothing and accessories. We've got stickers, we've got mugs, anything from bags and backpacks to t-shirts, magnets. We've even got an apron on here. So all kinds of different products, and again, more designs coming soon. So of course, as you purchase merch and perhaps for a gift for someone in your family or for yourself or whatever the case may be, keep in mind that we'll have more designs coming down the pipeline. So it's another way to support the work being done here From the Hawkeye of the Storm. So hopefully that excites people. It excites me, Don.
Corey, I do have one question. Do you have any What's the Upside t-shirts?
So the fact that you just brought it up, I'm really getting a kick out of, Don. The fact that Don Patterson just asked me that question. I cannot answer that question with a straight face right now, but let's just hang tight, and that question will be answered in the coming days or weeks. Okay, Don? Let's just
I can continue to hope, you're saying.
Yes, you can. You can continue to hope. All right, let's get Vincent involved in the conversation here. Vincent, welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, good evening. I'll kind of get right into it. I know you're kind of strapped for time. The first thing I want to touch on is I know Caden Proctor's been brought up in this chat a couple times, and I'm just going to voice what it is. The reason, or Oregon is notorious for throwing money out, and this is the enticement of that NIL and what the impact NIL has had on recruiting. That's bottom line. There's no equivocations or doubts about it. That's why he's taken that visits, because somebody's reached out to him about the possibilities of NIL and what comes with it. And people can argue that, but that's just what it is. Reason I say that is,
Vincent.
Go ahead.
Vincent.
Go ahead.
I'm going to challenge you on that.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So you're telling me, I'm not saying you're right or you're wrong, but I'm just want to clarify. You're telling me that the individual that I spoke with that is in Caden's circle, you're telling me that he was lying.
No, but that's the textbook answer for what you want to give either media or other outlets that are inquiring. Sure. But you made a good point earlier. You have an offense that's struggling. Is that a key reason as to why? Sure, it could be. But I look at, he had the opportunity to, or when he was narrowing down his list, he had it down to what? Iowa and Alabama, correct? As his last two.
Yes. But he had the visit scheduled with Oregon. They were one of his final schools.
He had a visit scheduled with Oregon at the time of his commitment?
No, he canceled the visits. Well, my understanding is that he was canceling the visits, but they were on his official visit schedule, if you will. So then he narrowed it down to Alabama and Iowa. Yes.
And I know that he canceled his last Alabama visit, right? Didn't he have one more scheduled that he canceled or something like that?
I don't believe so. I believe he went, the two visits, official visits he went on right before he committed to Iowa were Alabama and Iowa. So I don't even know that those were his top two schools, but he wanted the announcement to be special, and it was only feasible that if he was going to commit to one of those two schools, you should add the other school in. Don, does that make sense? You know, those are the only two schools he had visited recently. So if you just visit Iowa and then say, hey, I'm announcing, everybody knows you're going to Iowa. That's kind of how I interpreted that. So Oregon may have been number two. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought he had, I remember his either Twitter or one of his feeds said he's going to be deciding between Alabama and Iowa, but nevertheless, the reason to me, it's all about NIL is Oregon's done this in the past. They've done it here recently in the past couple of years where it's been pretty prominent. But I look at an Alabama where he chose to commit to Iowa over in Alabama. And what does Nick Saban also not do? They don't try to go out there and buy players either. So to me, the red flag is right there in here. You have Oregon, who has a propensity to want to throw out there, hey, we're backed by Nike. We have all this NIL money that's here as well. They're trying to entice through other avenues versus just, hey, we're a great football program and a great academic institution. That's just my take on it, or the vantage point that I have.
I understand what you're saying, but I just want to make it clear, Vincent, if the incentive is NIL, then the source that I spoke with on this and that I've had conversations with, either he was telling the truth or he wasn't telling the truth. There is no in between.
Yeah, okay.
Because the question was asked, is the incentive for Caden NIL? And the answer was no, not at all.
Okay.
I'm just telling you what he said. So I'm not saying you should believe it. I'm just saying either he's telling the truth or he's not. So,
but you're not going to go out.
Maybe he's not, but I don't know that.
You're not going to go out publicly and say, hey, yeah, we're wanting to see what our financial opportunities are at an institution. You're not going to go out and publicly say that because of the perception it gives to you as a potential prospect and player. But I get where you're coming from. That's my feeling is it's a vast majority of it is the NIL possibilities for Caden that Oregon is probably relaying to him. That's just, I guess, my take on it. The question I had for Don, or for both of you guys, I know a lot of people are kind of overlooking. I don't want to say overlooking Nebraska, but I have some concerns. And granted, I don't have Don's parameters where I can make sure that we know that it's a given. But as a coach, Don, what do you do to make sure that you're juggling both? What I mean by that is you want to make sure that you have your players prepared for Nebraska and that they're not overlooking the team that they have coming up. But also you do kind of have to look ahead to what the Big Ten championship game is going to be. So from a coaching perspective, what would you say you have in your, or what would you be doing as a coach to make sure that you're not putting focus away from Nebraska and merely looking ahead, but also preparing yourself in the same token, if that's not too vast or too wide of a question, I guess?
Well, I would simply remind the players that nothing else matters except what happens on Friday. If Friday doesn't work out well, then it's over. So we have no choice to get where we want to go. We have no choice but to focus entirely on Friday, because Friday's all that matters. And if you think that Nebraska doesn't want to win, then shame on you, because they want to win too. They want to win in so many cases just as much as we do. Imagine how frustrated they are. They're trying to come up with some kind of definitive accomplishment this season, and the only thing left for them to aspire to get accomplished is to find a way to beat us on Friday. So shame on you if you even think for a second about that next game, because without this game, there will be no next game, at least the one that matters. You know, there'll be a bowl game, of course, regardless of what happens on Friday. But wouldn't that be a shame to take them lightly and have it affect the outcome of the game? I don't think that'll happen, simply because I think we have the right kind of kids that are good listeners and understand what the coaches are presenting. And I can promise you that the coaches have done a good job of reminding the players nothing else matters except Friday. Because with what we want to accomplish, Nebraska is firmly set in our path, and we have no choice but to eliminate Nebraska to be able to pursue the rest of our goals. The focus is entirely on the Cornhuskers. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I hope that's where our focus stays, and I'm sure it will. I agree with you. I think you have the culture itself there. That's what they've or what we're known for, is making sure that we're heady and also putting things into perspective. But I just know if I'm a Nebraska player or fan, this is your opportunity to play spoiler. So they're gonna. I know I saw a comment earlier that, you know, we're gonna get everything, including the kitchen sink, and I think that's a pretty I guess good reality. I hope we're not looking past Nebraska and still focusing on the task at hand, and also making sure that we're prepared that they're going to come at us with everything that they have as far as trick plays and things of that nature. And we just have to make sure that we're always prepared for those. And hopefully Friday's the outcome that we're looking for, and we get on to the Big Ten championship game. Last question. I'll just turn it over to your next caller. Don, in recruiting, I'm sure you have plenty of stories and experiences. Are there any for you that stick out in your many years of coaching and recruiting that you mind sharing with us? Something that might be a funny story, a awkward circumstance, anything that we might want to hear as viewers. And I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Spencer.
Well, one of my favorites involves a guy named Merton Hanks. It involves Merton's mom, and I know Merton wouldn't mind me sharing this with everyone. It was just ironic because, let's face it, if you grew up in Texas, it doesn't get much better than the University of Texas. As Hayden once said, if you ever coach at a school that's called the University of, that's a good thing. And the University of Iowa, of course, fits that bill too. But anyway, we had a chance, we thought, in 1983 to go to the Cotton Bowl. Because let's face it, Hayden was a living legend in Texas. We had a good team, a very good team. And yet when bowl time rolled around, there weren't very many bowls back then. The Fiesta Bowl we thought was going to be our destination. Well, here's a shocker. They took Ohio State because Ohio had a lot more TVs than Iowa did, because that had a lot to do with bowl bids back in those days. When we lost out on the Fiesta Bowl, we thought for sure we were going to get the Cotton Bowl. The head of the Cotton Bowl committee happened to be Hayden's old sports information director when he was at SMU, a close personal friend. But in the end, University of Texas was playing in the Cotton Bowl, and the University of Texas said, no, we're not playing Iowa. Now, you may not believe that, but it's true. They got to pick their opponent, and they picked Georgia. And they had a chance to win the national title if they beat Georgia, and if another game or two went the way they were hoping. So they had an outside chance at a national title. the irony there is that they muffed a punt, and Georgia scored the winning touchdown. It was about a 10-yard drive for the winning touchdown. 1 year later, we played the University of Texas in the Freedom Bowl. The final was 55-17. All that confirmed is that Fred Akers was right. He should not want to play Iowa. And the reason was pretty obvious. They were fundamentally a man defense, and we had a lot of man beaters. And they saw a lot of them that very night. Incidentally, we had 55 points after 3 quarters. We did not score in the 4th quarter. We did not run the score up. That's the truth. But anyway, in recruiting Merton Hanks, Fred Akers was the coach. And we had a great relationship. And, of course, Merton thought the world of Coach Fry and thought the world of Bill Brazier, his position coach back in those days. Long story short, Fred Akers is in the home talking to Merton and his mom. And at some point, Merton's mom simply said, Coach Akers, why are you here wasting your time? Because Merton's made up his mind, and there's nothing you can say tonight that's going to change his mind or my mind. He's going to the University of Iowa. That was pretty much the end of the visit. And I always admired Connie for having the gumption, if you will. I think that's a Texas expression, to say what was exactly on her mind. She politely asked Fred Akers, the head coach at Texas, why don't you just move along? And had a great career, of course, at Iowa. And he'll always be one of my favorite players because he's not just a great player, he's an even better person. That's the truth.
Lemansky says, can't get my fill of Don's stories. So,
I'm sorry, it's a lengthy story, Corey, but sometimes a story takes a while to tell.
It's always enjoyable. And Tony, I missed this question earlier. And of course, he called in. As he's found out through this show, these Hawkeye Hangout shows, I don't know that I've ever fielded a women's basketball question until tonight, Don, but we've been all over the place. And Don, you've been a part of it, so appreciate that. Vincent also wanted to know about Mel Tucker. Apparently there was news regarding to him pocketing a bonus that was meant to be shared amongst staff. I know you think very highly of Mel Tucker. I have not heard this, so this is just a question from Vincent, so I'm sure you'll be doing some Googling after we're done with this show, Don.
That would be terribly disappointing if that was the case. Here's an example that comes to mind for me. Matt Campbell at Iowa State. As I understand it, Matt Campbell went with a smaller salary just so he could boost the salaries of those assistant coaches because he wanted it to be on a more competitive level with the other Big 12 coaching staffs. That's the kind of thing that we can all appreciate. Coach Fry always said this. He said, if you got a good coach, you can't do enough for him. And if you've got a bad coach, you can't get rid of him quick enough. So reward those guys that deserve to be rewarded. And I think the fact that Kirk has been able to keep a lot of his staff says the same thing about Kirk. You know, those coaches know that he'll go to bat for them and he'll work hard to make things better for them. And that's what any head coach should do. Shame on any head coach that somehow thinks it's all about him, because any coach that thinks that is going to be destined for a big fall at some point in their career.
Erica says, honestly, a what's the upside shirt is a must, as is a cowboy hat for Coach. Please make it happen. Don, you may have to bite the bullet at some point on the cowboy hat. I know you can do it. You're an old Texas boy, and embrace the roots, Don. Embrace the roots.
Well, only to please Erica then.
Hey,
I guess if a hat shows up, I guess I don't have much choice but to wear it. But I'm going to promise you here and now, I'm not going to look like the Marlboro Man. It's not going to work out. It's not going to work out that well.
You heard the man. Super chat it up, or if you make a donation, make sure you know this is for a Don Patterson cowboy hat. Okay, a couple questions that we missed here. Again, thank you, Erica, for the super chat. Eric said, excited to buy some merch. Big Ten Championship, here we come. Appreciate the super chat and the support, Eric. Yes, definitely get to looking through the merch options. And again, more options to come. You can see more in the description below. Lemansky with the super chat. Thank you, Lemansky. Can't wait until I get my sweatshirt embossed with Erica and Don Wonder. What's the upside? All right. Cole, whatever happened to Stylianos? Whatever happened to Stylianos?
You can take that one, Corey.
I don't have an answer, but listen, Iowa took one transfer. Yeah, they took one, Don. Tight end from the Colonial League who's not playing. Now he's playing.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say not playing. He's played in some goal line sets. He might have a chance this weekend with Sam Laporta out, but man alive.
Well, right now we know this. A true freshman is ahead of him on the depth chart, right?
You're right. And I'll say this. Iowa needs to, Don, you don't like the transfer portal as it is. You don't like NIL as it is, but I think you and I are in agreement through private conversations. I think you're comfortable with me saying this, that Iowa needs to get in the transfer portal this offseason. There are needs that need filled in the portal.
It's not going to go away.
It's not going away, folks. And I think Iowa will. I don't think you have a choice. They should have been in it last year, but it's a must this year. CJ wanted to know what kind of pie I'm having. I've got some pumpkin pie. I've got some apple pie. And if I can scrounge up some Cool Whip, Don, my evening will be complete. Now, Erica does bring up French silk and pecan pie. Both are brilliant. Pecan pie, whatever you want to say. Warm or cold, Don? Which one? Or room temperature?
Warm.
Have you ever had it?
Yes, but I would recommend warm over cold.
You like the ice cream with the pecan pie? The vanilla ice cream?
You know, you'll laugh. Now, swear to God, this is true. We went over to Lisa's aunt and uncle's for Thanksgiving dinner last Sunday. And as we came back, I'll give a plug to Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel has excellent pecan pies. We stopped only to pick up a pecan pie. And I'm the only one in my family that likes pecan pie. So it's working out well for me. I look forward to a slice of pie every night, and I haven't had mine yet tonight, so I'll be enjoying it here shortly.
Pecan pie is a brilliant invention, Don, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is the state tree. The state tree of Texas is the pecan tree.
All right. Football related here. We're over 2 hours down. We can go some rapid fire here. Dragon, what about Trey Palmer? Who will be covering him? Any worries?
Yeah, I have worries. Let's not get caught too often in single coverage. The simple way to do it would be to roll up on Trey Palmer wherever he is. Now, that's a little bit tricky, of course, if he's an inside receiver. If he's an outside receiver, not so difficult. You know, put the corner up on him, make that corner a flat defender, have a safety over the top, effectively double him. There's several ways to double him. That's just simply referred to as half coverage. But another possibility is to truly bracket him. You know, to have an inside defender and an outside defender. And now you're defending either inside or outside throws, regardless of what happens.
But Don, Phil Parker's not moving DeJean and Moss to opposite sides of the field to follow Trey Palmer. They ain't doing that.
That is another option. If you have one corner that is clearly the better defender, then you can move him to the assigned receiver. And of course, the best way to counter that is to have him as an inside receiver, or maybe to motion him across the formation. Things like that, of course, can complicate it.
But Don, Phil doesn't do that. Am I correct in saying Phil does not move corners all over the field?
I think back to that Purdue game. Remember the Purdue game years ago in Kinnick, where they threw 5 out of 6 snaps. They threw to one receiver.
Yep.
He happened to be a short side receiver. I believe at the time we had a field corner and a boundary corner. And they were picking on the boundary corner. When the boundary corner got beat a couple of times, we pulled him out and put in the backup boundary corner. He got beat too. You know what happened next? That field corner was over defending that guy wherever he was. But that was our last resort to do it that way. And by then it was too late. They already had 2 touchdowns.
Not something that Iowa prefers to do. And I would not expect them to do that on Saturday unless all else fails. I think they're comfortable with either DeJean or Moss.
I think so. I think it's not easy to even assess what's the better matchup for us. Is it Riley or is it Cooper? We'll find out during the game. If one guy can cover better than the other, then you might see him following that receiver wherever he is. I hope it doesn't come down to that, though.
Wayfarer of the Wilderness, lived in Iowa for 3 decades, moved to North Carolina, was back in Iowa for a funeral last week, stopped in Iowa City for a quick walk around Kinnick, got a ticket for parking like an idiot, so it was worth it. Go Hawks. Tickets around the campus seem to be fairly common. Parking tickets do. Don, Courtney says, will you go to the championship game if Iowa is there? Don, you've basically said you're probably not. I have not said either way, and I won't say one way or the other until we get to next week. But
If it could conveniently work into my schedule, I'd be there. I was there a year ago. I don't think it's going to be an option for us this year, just based on other complications we have with our schedule.
We get some people in the chat who agree on your assessment of Cracker Barrel. Dragon says he loves Cracker Barrel, Don.
They have great pecan pies. They do.
He also wants to know about the chances that Jack Campbell takes home the Butkus Award.
What I don't know who the other finalists are. I would hope that the finalists are not on teams that are ranked 1, 2, or 3, because that's probably the biggest hurdle that Jack has to get over. He's not playing on a team that's ranked anywhere near the top 10.
If they win the Big Ten championship somehow, Don, that helps your chances at 9-4.
Absolutely. I don't know when the voting is. I don't know when the voting ends. I'd like to think it'll be after those. Probably will be after those conference championship games, I would think.
Harry Gold wants to know if Casey Thompson's playing on Friday. Sounds like he is. You know, how healthy is Casey Thompson? That's a question mark. Hawkeye Howard, we are wishing you all the best, Hawkeye Howard. We hope you are home soon and continue on the mend. He says, what's stopping Phil Parker moving to be a head coach? I think the only thing stopping Phil Parker is Phil Parker, Don.
I think so. I'm sure he's had some inquiries. First off, Phil feels a special loyalty to Iowa football. He's grateful to Kirk for giving him that opportunity when Norm retired. And obviously, he's well compensated for his time. I don't think Phil's a very material person. Of course, he wants to be able to live a comfortable life with his family and provide well for his family. But he's been doing that as an employee at Iowa. So he'll certainly have a chance to do it a while longer, because our fans certainly remind him every day of the week that he's greatly appreciated.
Mark says he loves Don's dry sense of humor. What does everyone else think? I enjoy your sense of humor, Don.
I'm glad to hear that I have one. I wasn't sure.
I would enjoy your jokes more if you were wearing a cowboy hat.
Probably so. Do I have to put on boots and spurs too?
We're going to make that happen, right, Don? Okay, Mark goes on to say, Don, is there any advantage for a team to pull out a trick play first before the other team pulls out one?
Absolutely. Best example I can give you is the championship game a year ago. I remember commenting after the game, Michigan did not apologize after the game for running 4 exotics. And you might recall the double pass was a chunk play. It was a touchdown. And those 4 plays, incidentally, went for 159 yards. I think it was a good idea for Michigan to run some trick plays against Iowa, because they certainly paid off.
Absolutely. Mark wants to know, it's not Iowa's DNA, but when Iowa struggles running the ball, would you like to see Iowa go 4 wide receivers to unstack the box? Could you discuss the pros and cons to 4 receivers spread out?
Well, here's an obvious con. Can you guarantee me that we'll find 4 receivers that deserve to be on the field all at the same time? That's not a strong position for us right now, in part because of injury. But
you've got, for the record, they do have 4. I mean, you do have 4 guys with Brecht, Bruce, Reganey, and Vines. You do have 4 you could put out there that play.
True. But let's understand this. When you put 4 receivers out there, you have what I would call 2 short edges, meaning short edges to your formation. So just think about that. Job is difficult for a tackle. Any offensive tackle will tell you, I have a better chance to block that edge rusher if there's a tight end line next to me. So if you take away a tight end on both sides and the tackle is the widest guy there in the immediate formation, then it just became more difficult to block both edges. That's part of the problem with 2 open ends. You better have good offensive tackles.
All right, folks. Final segment. We'll get Don's closing thoughts on Nebraska and Iowa's chances to take home not only another trophy, but a trophy that gives them a chance at another trophy the following week. That's the West Division title. We'll be back right after this. Welcome to Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. All right, appreciate Iowa Floor Covering again for sponsoring the show this evening. And question from Brian here. Well, not a question, a comment. I think if Iowa wins the West Friday, Don and Corey need to do the hokey pokey once during the show. That's probably not going to happen for me, but Don, I'd pay money to see you do it with the cowboy hat on. BJ wants to know, what are your thoughts on Rule turning down the Nebraska job? I have not heard that rumor, Don.
Is that true? I don't know.
I have not heard that.
I have made the statement that Matt Rule is an outstanding coach, and I think he'd be a wonderful choice.
Absolutely. That's the wrong banner. Let's get to question from Brett. What are Don's thoughts on the Big Ten divisions, where they should go once USC and UCLA join in 24 current divisions? Too lopsided.
Well, what I would like to see, I'd like to see both of them in the West. And that would simply mean we need to move somebody from the West to the East. Obviously, if you bring in both to the West, nobody can complain that the East is too good and the West is enough. It would balance the power out, so to speak. And if I was one of those West Coast schools, I would prefer to only halfway across the country rather than fly all the way to the East Coast. That seems a little absurd, really. So I'd like to see us have them both join the West and then move somebody over. And I guess Purdue would be the most logical, simply because based on geography, they would be the most logical to move. And Indiana's in the East already. It wouldn't be hard to imagine that both Indiana and Purdue should be both in the East. So Purdue would be the logical one to move.
RDHV wants to know, what's the famous dish made in your house? Does Lisa have something that she make a good lasagna, or is she a eggplant?
She absolutely does. Her mom's maiden name was Moretta, and Grandma Mary made great lasagna, and then Lisa's mom made that same great lasagna, and Lisa has that same recipe, and she makes lasagna just like Grandma Mary.
Can I ask you, Don, how do you? Have we talked about eggplant before?
No.
How do you feel about like a fried eggplant parmesan?
I'd be okay if we never talked about eggplant, because I'm not. You got to realize, growing up in Texas, we weren't likely to eat eggplant at any particular time. If it wasn't potatoes, we probably didn't eat it.
Okay, but you eat lasagna, so I want to know: have you had a fried eggplant parmesan?
Have not.
Would you try it? So you've never tried it?
I'll try it before I try that cowboy hat on.
All right, here's the deal. I want you and Lisa to go to Olive Garden and just get Olive Garden's fried eggplant parmesan. All right. Why am I giving them free advertising, first of all? This is the only time I'm ever going to bring them up, because I want to give them free publicity here. But you go to Olive Garden, you try their fried eggplant parmesan, Don, you report back. All right?
You're telling me it's to die for?
I'll let you determine that, but let's just say this. I'm a big lasagna guy. I've always been a big lasagna guy. There is no meal that I would rather have than eggplant parmesan, fried eggplant parmesan.
Even from Olive Garden?
I love it from Olive Garden.
I'm an Olive Garden fan. I don't mind saying that.
Well,
I think it's a good chain. They have reliable food.
You need to give that a try. You really do. And
Corey, for you, I'll do that.
Okay, I want to report back, and maybe I'll treat you some eggplant parmesan at the end of the season, Don. All right, Dragon wants to know any guesses on how many defensive miracles Iowa has in them. I wouldn't call them miracles. It's just you know, being in the
Just
right
sound
place.
football.
Yeah, it's just sound fundamental football, right, Don?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
there's a reason why it continues to happen. And some fans on the outside may say, well, Iowa's getting lucky. Well, this is what Iowa does. And we've seen it in almost every game. The Wisconsin game, Minnesota.
I have a quote for that. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Absolutely. Let me see here. We got to finish this up here, Don. Lemansky, thank you for reminding everybody. Please hit the like button on your way out. Do appreciate that reminder. Rough Riders, thank you. Very much appreciated this. I don't deserve that compliment, but thank you very much. Rough Rider returns. Eric says, guys, like and subscribe. Become a premium member if you have the means. Says this is a highly underrated show with Coach Patterson and Coach Close for basketball, not to mention the former player guest. I absolutely agree, Don. You and Gary Close are an absolute gift to this show. And
I bet Gary feels like I do. It's just my way to give back to the fans. I'm very grateful to all the fan support we've had over all these many years. And if I can make a show with you a little more enjoyable, then I certainly want to do that.
Well, you've put in longer shows here on this channel than I ever thought you would. So appreciate you I hope you enjoy it. I hope that you actually enjoy doing this, because this would be torture if not. Kirk wants to know, Coach Patterson, any memories of Coach Bobby Elliott?
A lot of great memories of Bobby. Outstanding football coach. As bright as he could be. We're talking about Bob Elliott's son. A lot of people might not be aware of that. But Bobby was a great competitor, had an incredible work ethic. His players loved him. He did coach Merton Hanks. Bill Brazier was the defensive coordinator, but Bobby was the defensive backs coach. And just a wonderful man. He was taken away from us way too early, but he certainly lived a very fulfilling life, even though he was taken way too soon.
Get that question from Kirk. One more comment here from Kyle, and then I think we're good, Don. Kyle says, any thoughts on making an Instagram page? Iowa Instagram community is strong. We have several fairly large pages that I think would gladly promote, collab with your channel. I appreciate you saying that, Kyle. I do a bad job. I'll admit that. I do a bad job with our Facebook page. But please reach out to me, Kyle. If you're still watching this show, please reach out to me at this email, from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. From the eye of the storm at outlook.com. Do appreciate you offering to help, but please email me and we can certainly chat. All right. Parting thoughts on Iowa, Nebraska, Don. Everything's on the line here. I mean, you got a West Division title on the line, a chance at getting to 8 wins, and a chance to play for a Big Ten title for the second straight year. And this doesn't happen every year. I mean, it's happened. We have the chance of this being the second straight year, but Iowa's only been to the Big Ten championship game twice since its installment. So these opportunities don't come every day, every year. How does Iowa ultimately? How would you sum up Iowa? How they get it done on Saturday against I think a dangerous Nebraska offense?
Well, I'd like to think we can start fast. What we don't want to have happen is to have Nebraska hang around and hang around and hang around. You've always heard me say, Corey, when you're playing against a team that's the underdog, you need to do anything but give them encouragement. The longer you allow them to hang around, the more encouragement you in fact give them. And at some point you will get a fanatical effort, because at some point they'll realize, oh my God, we're still in the game. We can actually win this game. You don't want that to happen. You need to discourage them early and often, which means we need to get off to a fast start. We need to be aggressive with our play calling, even in the first half. And then just from a strategy standpoint, we need to keep the ball away from them by sustaining drives, by grinding out first downs. Hopefully we can do to them a lot like we did to Purdue. The only difference is, even if we have them down, we still need to keep the pedal to the metal, because we had weather on our side against Purdue. If it's going to be an ideal day to throw the football, then that's going to give them a better chance to come back and get back into the game with their own play calling. So I do think it's critical that we get up on them and we stay aggressive with our play calling and do a good job of keeping the ball away from them. And defensively, just do a great job of eliminating the big play. I don't think they're going to drive the ball down our throat. The bigger challenge will be to eliminate the big play. That's our goal.
Coach Patterson, appreciate you as always taking the extra time this evening on a non-post-game day for time with our fans and time with our listeners, and we'll look forward to talking with you on Saturday.
That sounds good. Saturday or Friday?
Friday. Thank you for correcting that. I've said Saturday every week this year. So
Friday night, 9:15. I understand.
And the good news is, Don, regardless of result, we will get a bowl game. Regardless of what happens on Friday, we do get a bowl game because they've gotten they're bowl eligible, and we didn't know that for a while. And they're sitting at 3-4. There were question marks about the potential of this team being bowl eligible. So that is the good news. Reminder, special announcement earlier in the show: merchandise is here, folks. I'll do this one more time. I'm going to throw the link for the merch in the live chat, and you can check out the assortment, and more is on the way. So appreciate the Johnny O Show for helping to develop the merchandise. He's been hard at work, and certainly check out his channel on YouTube. You can also shop Amazon with us. That's another thing that he's helped us launch here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. There's a link in the description below. If you're buying on Amazon, folks, regardless if it's whatever it is, you're buying anything on Amazon, just click the link in our description to make those purchases, and you're supporting our show. It's as simple as that. It doesn't cost you any more. When you buy through our Amazon link, it helps from the Hawkeye of the Storm. To become a premium member, click the join button next to From the Hawkeye of the Storm here on YouTube. You may have to go to your browser if you're watching through an Apple iPhone or iPad, but that is another way you can help support this channel. Please share the show out on social media, even when we're done with our live show, because people can watch this show on demand. Most of our viewers, actually, Don, most of our viewers are on-demand viewers, and so that's what's great about being here on YouTube. So certainly share the show out on social media. You can follow me on Twitter, @FromTheHawkeye on Twitter. You can like our Facebook page. That would help immensely. Even if you're not active on Facebook, go ahead and give the Facebook page a like and a follow. If you're interested in sponsoring anything here From the Hawkeye of the Storm, reach out to me, From the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. That's From the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. Please hit that like button, the thumbs up button on your way out, as our one of our listeners reminded earlier. Please subscribe as well if you haven't done so. You can donate to the channel by means of Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, also found in the description. Yes, on Friday, it's Nebraska at Iowa. The West Division on the line. The Hawkeyes need a victory to advance to Indianapolis on the following Saturday, and they'll get an extra day of prep. I guess you could look at it that way, even though they won't know exactly who they're playing until Saturday. Would get an extra day of rest on if they play in that game as opposed to a Michigan or Ohio State. That's one thing we didn't talk about. So the game this Friday is at 3 p.m. Central Time on BTN. It will be followed by not Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. We'll have let's correct this because I want to make sure everybody's aware that following the Iowa men's basketball game, we will have Iowa postgame with Coach Gary Close. So we'll have the football game at 3. Basketball game starts at 6. That game will be on CBS Sports Network from the Panhandle down in Florida. Iowa and Clemson. We'll have Iowa postgame with Coach Gary Close following that game. And then following that postgame show at approximately 9:15 p.m. Central Time, Coach Patterson and I will be here with you for Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. So, Don, it's a full docket for Friday. But it's just a great time of year with all the sporting events. We've got Iowa State playing Villanova tomorrow, which will capture my attention. And, of course, all the football games and the pros tomorrow. So enjoy a big sports week ahead. And this is going to, I think this is an underrated, I think people are taking Nebraska a bit for granted. I know some people in the chat are taking them seriously, but I think you and I both agreed this is a dangerous game, and not that Kirk's guys are going to be overlooking this team, but Iowa's got its hands full on Friday.
Yeah, history says it'll be a one-score game. The last 4 have been.
Absolutely. Coach Patterson, appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you Friday for Coach Don Patterson. I'm Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We will talk to y'all soon.